Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Killed His Father? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. When Izuku is 5, he kills his father. This is how it happens. Evening sun warming a threadbare carpet, a radio playing from the kitchen, toys for a child scattered across the floor. The apartment is small but lived in, kind, the sturdy walls and old floor emanating the same safety a family has gifted it with for the past several years. It has been, a home to many people. Izuku is small, too small, his father frets, despite his wife's assurances, and bright, a child who burbles and cheers and plays with a gleeful abandon. He is small for 5 but makes up for it in spirit, in bravery and kindness. His father loves him more than anything in this world. He loves his son so much sometimes it feels like his heart is bursting in his chest. That is how it happens. Izuku falls in the living room, bangs his head off the coffee table. He cries out and his father rushes from the kitchen, and Izuku is scared and hurting and wants the warmth and reassurance of his father. He reaches out with his heart, finds the light and color he knows as dad happy safe warm, and seizes it with a power he doesn't understand. He squeezes, tight in his panic as blood runs into his eyes, and his father's dead body hits the floor 3 feet from him. Izuku had held his father's heart in his hands and grasped it until it burst. 6 years later. Every day kind of fingesicus, if Izuku is honest. The best he can hope for is each day sking slightly less, but he's gotten used to the monotony of misery. He deserves it, doesn't he? He keeps his head down walking to school. Last night was bad, nightmares of hearts rupturing in his hands and spilling white feathers, and Izuku had slipped out of the house before his mother woke. Around him, his world spins and spirals with colors and sounds no one else can see. A stranger passes too close to him on the street and a small zap repels him. Izuku flinches away. He tucks his shoulders in tighter and tries to rein his quirk in. He hates the hustle and bustle of the streets, but he knows the crowded trains are worse, and he wouldn't risk a train for the world. The school building sits in the distance, its tired infrastructure always groaning just a little louder than the last time Izuku heard it. School's only started for 3 months, but he already wants it done. He wants to be done. He wants the summer to come, so he can plant flowers with his mother in the park and read on the roof of their complex and be away from people. He wants the summer to come so his glaring lack of friends is less obvious, and his abundance of bullies is less painful. "Hey, shithead. I'm talking to you, mute." Bakugo shouts, catching him just as Izuku enters the school courtyard. Already, he shrinks in on himself, tries to grab a hold of his quirk tightly so it doesn't act out. Bakugo jostles Izuku's shoulder with a soot-blackened hand, and Izuku flinches from the movement of Bakugo's center. The bright sparks that threaten to ignite his old friend's quirk jump away from him. "What's wrong, Deku? Too scared to say anything?" Bakugo jeers, sticking his face too close before rearing back when something sparks painfully against his nose. He screws his face up in rage and Izuku feels the familiar resignation well up as small explosions pop into existence. Bakugo pulls his hand back and bares his teeth, swings at Izuku who simply braces himself for the pain that never arrives. "Dude, chill out," an unfamiliar voice says, and when Izuku cracks his eyes open someone is standing between him and holding Bakugo's fist. "What? Get your effing hands off of me!" Bakugo yells, attracting far too much attention in the school courtyard. A supervising teacher glances over and Izuku nervously ducks his head, feels his stomach roil at the sound and attention. "Yeah, no problem as long as you leave this kid alone," the stranger says, and Bakugo sputters a few more vulgar words before wrenching his hand free and stalking away. They watch him go with a quiet hum before turning to face Izuku. "You okay?" he asks, his turn revealing warm dark skin, eyes deep and dark and kind. Izuku finds himself lost for words when faced with that pretty gaze on him and can only duck his head and shuffle his feet. The boy's aura is soft and thick like cotton, reassuring and a kind gold orange. "I'm Ellie, I moved here from America," Ellie says, smiling gently down at Izuku. He's tall, taller than Bakugo, his shoulders broad. He's not done growing. Izuku flushes heavily and tucks his hair behind his ear with a shaking hand. His eyes dart up before flicking away again. Ellie laughs quietly and steps a little closer. I don't have to know your name if you're not comfortable with it, he says, something in his tone suggesting he's familiar with this conversation. Izuku chews on his lip and feels out Ellie's energy, lets himself go blind for a moment with the sturdy hum. His skin crawls with the fear of being with someone new, but he can't. He swallows heavily and fishes his little whiteboard and marker out of his backpack pocket. Shame crawls up his neck as he scribbles quickly on it under Ellie's confused gaze. I'm Midoriya Izuku. I can't speak. Thank you for helping me. Ellie's brow furrows as he reads, but his face breaks into a grin once again. No problem, he says, shifting his backpack. I'm glad to help. It's nice to meet you, Midoriya. Do you know Japanese Sign Language? His grin widens as Izuku nods. Wanna teach me? He asks, and Izuku feels something foreign and hot and sweet fill his chest. He tries to stop his smile, but it's persistent when faced with Ellie's. His cheeks hurt as he writes on his board, script smearing with his enthusiasm. It's nice to meet you, Ellie. Yes, I would like to teach you. And then, emboldened by Ellie's entire being brightening with happiness, he writes again just below it. Can we be friends? And Ellie changes everything with his happy confirmation. Things shift with Ellie. Inko is scared to say it's solely due to the American boy, but she knows it's true. Izuku has a friend for the first time in 6 years, has someone who learns sign for him, comes over every day and doesn't shy away from his finicky electric quirk. And now, for all of that, Izuku feels more real. He's brighter, a little mischievous, and Inko feels like she's starting to get her baby back. Bro, you gotta eat your greens, Ellie says, leaning across the table to push Izuku's broccoli closer to the center of his plate. Izuku sticks his tongue out and Ellie blows a raspberry. Right back at him. Izuku signs you can't make me and Ellie takes it for the challenge it is, preparing to lunge at Izuku or something equally as harebrained when Inko clears her throat loudly. Ellie has the decency to look sheepish and apologizes swiftly before sitting again. They finish the meal, Izuku eating all his vegetables, and the boys help Inko wash the dishes before relocating to Izuku's room for homework and games. The dishes done, kitchen cleaned and wiped down, Inko finds herself in the living room with a worn scrapbook in her hands. She knows if she opens it, she'll cry, she always does. But seeing Izuku flush with laughter in his own quiet way at dinner had reminded her of before her husband died. Inside the front cover, Inko traces the printout of her LTRS-ND of Izuku at 3 months. Even then he was so small, so mild-mannered. She had loved him the moment she saw his tiny, twitching form on the monitor. More medical images follow, until she comes to the photo after Izuku's birth. Hisashi is crying, crouched next to Inko in the hospital bed as she cradles Izuku. He was such an easy birth, had come out crying as if apologizing for the inconvenience. Inko brushes a tear away and rests a single finger under Hisashi's face. Page after page, Inko watches her little boy grow up all over again. He's constantly decked out in All Might merchandise, hardly without a smile and his beaming father. Hisashi was always so nervous, always so protective. Inko knows he would have fought the entire world for Izuku. Inko comes to one page and has to stop. There's only 3 photos, unlike the other crammed pages. One is of Izuku in his All Might onesie, asleep and drooling on Hisashi's chest. They're both out cold on the sofa, had been trying to stay awake for Inko. Another is Izuku alone, beaming at the camera, holding his tiny hands out to present a bundle of picked flowers for his parents. His hair is a brilliant dark green in the sunlight, and the joy on his face in the photo is one Inko never saw again. The last picture is the hardest for Inko to look at, knowing she never saw Hisashi and Izuku together again after this moment. Her husband has Izuku in his lap, and they're watching an All Might video together with equally rapt attention. Before she can stop them, tears cross her face and Inko has to muffle her sobs in her hand. She doesn't suddenly remember Hisashi is gone, or feel the pain all over again. Sometime in the past 6 years the grief has sunk deep into her bones. It's as a part of her as Izuku is. She has used up all the tears she has for Hisashi and misses him every day. But it's not her husband's death that hurts so bad, no, it's the part of her son that died that day too. Every day she remembers it, she is awash in grief, in rage, at the thought of her son left alone with his father's body for all those hours while she was working. Some days she drowns in the knowledge that Izuku feels guilty about killing Hisashi, blames himself for it, as if he was anything other than a scared, hurt child, and she can't help but hate herself for not being there. Midoriya, ma'am? Are you all right? Ellie asks quietly, startling Inko. She snaps the photo album shut and hastily wipes her eyes. She doesn't want Ellie to see her like this, to think anything else of her or Izuku. It's okay, he whispers, stepping closer until he can sit next to her on the sofa. His eyes are sad and understanding, and Inko feels her heart hurt at that. He carefully, slowly settles his hand on her wrist and smiles reassuringly at her. I know things have been awful, and you and Izuku have. The past 6 years were harder than I can imagine. And I've only been around for a short while, but Ellie chews on his lip, something he picked up from Izuku, before gently squeezing Inko's wrist. I'm here now, he says more firmly, meeting her eyes. I'm here and I'm not leaving. And the promise in his voice, the assurance, the confidence, the sturdiness of his words, loosens something tight and knotted and unsure in Inko's chest, and she smiles and pulls Ellie to her and holds him tightly. Hours later, when Inko's tears have dried and sleep is calling, she peeks into Izuku's room to check on the boys. She can't help but smile at them, at the comforter of the bed mussed and thrown about over Izuku's small form, and Ellie's hand reaching up to clasp his gently from the futon on the floor. 3 years later. Midoriya, is it all right if we talk about your father a little today? Miss Fuji asks. Izuku ducks his head so he can hide behind his bangs and shrugs. His therapist hums and sets her clipboard aside. We can if you feel it's important, Izuku signs. He refuses to look up and focuses instead on the plush brown rug under his feet. A few feet away, Miss Fuji's heart shudders in its arrhythmia, and Izuku flinches to feel the electric pulses stutter. That was my heart again, wasn't it? She asks gently. Izuku nods hesitantly and clenches his fists. They're both silent. Can you tell me if I need to replace the batteries in my clock? She asks, and Izuku hesitates for only a moment before closing his eyes. The room lights up, individual electric fields swirling and humming and dancing to technicolored beats. He finds the clock easily enough, behind him and to the right. He feels the battery, listens carefully to the chirping of the circuit, and shakes his head. His quirk slips back as he opens his eyes. It will last a while longer, he signs, and Miss Fuji smiles and thanks him. They sit in silence for a few moments, and Izuku thinks of his father. He thinks of the wide smile and chipped tooth he remembers from his childhood, bright gray eyes and dark windswept hair. He can't even picture his face without feeling the familiar wave of guilt and self-hatred. I killed him, Izuku signs, blinking back tears. With your quirk? Miss Fuji asks. Izuku nods. I was 5. And you blame yourself? Despite being 5. She says. Izuku feels hot shame burn his throat as tears clot his eyelashes. I killed him. I killed my dad, my mom's husband. I killed part of our family. It doesn't matter what age I was because I still took that away from her. Does your mother blame you? Miss Fuji asks, after giving him a moment to wipe the tears away. Izuku blinks at her and shakes his head. She taps her pen against her mouth. She doesn't blame you because it's not your fault. You didn't intend to. You hadn't had any training, you had no knowledge of your quirk. Miss Fuji says. Her dark eyes pierce Izuku's heart and he finds he can't. Look away. You were young and hurt and scared. You did nothing wrong, and your mother does not blame you. Miss Fuji leans forward slightly and her eyes soften. I know your father wouldn't either, she adds, and Izuku crumples into sobs. What do you want to do? After all this? Ellie asks, twirling a blade of grass in his fingers. The summer had started, and soon they'd have only a year before it was time to choose a secondary school. Izuku rolled over to face Ellie on the hill they were laying on. I don't know. Izuku signs. Ellie lets go of the blade of grass and it's whisked away by the wind. Did you know when you were younger? he asks, and Izuku picks at the torn skin around his fingernails. Ellie bats his fingers away and Izuku stings his tongue out, yelping when Ellie tries to grab it. They tussle for only a few minutes, heat too oppressive for it to be serious. Izuku ends on his stomach, head pillowed on the cool grass and eyes shut. The grass's field tickles his own, squeaking like it was saying hello. I wanted to be a hero, Izuku tells Ellie. That dream was crushed, butchered when he and his mother were waiting in the hospital, when the doctors announced that Hisashi had died hours before they arrived. When Izuku had ripped his father's heart apart in his chest, killed him before his father knew he was dying. The first and last time Izuku would ever use his quirk on another person. Ellie suddenly looks painfully sad, like he knows what Izuku is thinking, his almond eyes getting sad and serious and mouth turning down. Izuku panics and scrambles to a sitting position, patting Ellie's face in an attempt to comfort him. He didn't mean to make Ellie sad or upset him, they were having such a good time, and Izuku just had to go and the other boy smiles and catches Izuku's hands in his own. Hey, don't go on blaming yourself, okay? Ellie says, scooting closer until their legs press together. I asked, you didn't do anything wrong. Don't get upset now. Izuku makes a face at him and stares at Ellie suspiciously, leaning closer to ensure that the sadness is gone from his face. Izuku squints at him until Ellie licks his nose, falling back while he cackles. I want to be part of a support crew, Ellie says, sometime later. His voice is quiet. I want to build costumes and support items for heroes. For you. Izuku doesn't realize what he's said, not right away. When he does, he turns to Ellie, stares at him with wide eyes. He's staring back firmly, lip trembling. He reaches forward and grabs Izuku's hands. You can still be a hero, Ellie says, voice breaking, and he's crying too when Izuku hugs him. When Izuku is 14, he decides to become a hero. It's all thanks to Ellie, really, and Izuku's therapist and his mom, because they are the ones who encourage him and push him to work past his guilt and self-hatred. It's all because of them. He loves them more than he can put into words. His family is the most important thing in his life. Sometimes, though, that love and affection is tinged by something else. Namely frustration. Come on. You can beat me. Ellie urges, his white smile blinding against his dark skin. Izuku huffs out a short breath and tries to press harder, tries to pin Ellie's hand against the wood, but his forearm seizes and he loses the arm wrestling match. He drops his head onto the picnic table with a thunk. That was so good, Izuku. Ellie says, somehow bereft of exhaustion. You're holding out longer every time. The praise makes Izuku feel warm in his chest, the same sweet flush Ellie always manages to drag out of him, but he keeps his face down on the wood to hide his blush. I'm awful, Izuku signs, partly so Ellie will protest, partly because that's how he feels. I'm weak. Izuku, Ellie says, his voice scolding, but fingers slip into his hair and rub along his scalp gently. You're not awful, you're a kid, and you're small from genetics, and you're doing your best. You'll grow stronger, and bigger, and faster. And I'm gonna help, Ellie tells him, his voice so confident and self-assured that Izuku has to believe him despite the doubt festering in his chest. He offers a crooked smile and Ellie beams, all dimples and warm, warm happiness. Now to the monkey bars, let's go, Ellie urges, and Izuku peels himself off the hot bench and follows him to the playground. And so it goes as it had been. Every morning, before it gets too hot, Izuku and Ellie do physical training to prepare for you. After lunch, they do some martial arts or gymnastics at the dojo down the street from Ellie's apartment, or practice their quirks inside. The most common place they train is the park, because there's big grassy areas and the playground for obstacle and agility practice. Ellie wrote the whole thing up. One of his aunts he lives with is a physical trainer and nutritionist, and she helped him with the plan. Izuku had been shy about it, but he loves the fitness. It gives him a routine that's enjoyable and lets him spend time with Ellie, and it makes his mom happy to see him so motivated. For the first few weeks of summer it was the same thing every day, until a nondescript Wednesday turns Izuku and Ellie's training right around. They're planning out the obstacle course for the day across the entire playground, using colored duct tape to coordinate it. Hey, are you guys, are you training? Someone asks from behind Izuku, and he turns to see a boy about his age, his face lined with faded red and white scales. It reminds him vividly of the kahaku he sees in stores. Yeah, for the UE entrance exam, Ellie says, stepping up next to Izuku. He edges back a little to angle behind Ellie, nervous around someone new. The other boy's field is strong and steadfast, not unlike Ellie's but for the soft pastel mix of colors, shifting mauves and yellows. It's gentle but firm under Izuku's sight. Oh, me too actually, the boy says, shifting slightly. The scales on his face spread onto his jaw, collarbone, disappear under his shirt but return along his arms. Izuku can see them run down his legs, behind which a long scaled tail hides. The boy flushes heavily under the scrutiny and tugs at his dark bangs, too nervous to meet Izuku or Ellie's gazes. They share a glance and Ellie smiles encouragingly, signs it's up to you. Izuku tangles his fingers before taking a deep breath. Do you want to train with us? He asks once the stranger lifts his eyes, Ellie opening his mouth to translate, but the boy's face lights up. Yes. I would love to, if you're sure. Signs, and Izuku and Ellie share a shocked look before turning back to him. You know sign? Ellie asks, and the boy nods. One of my foster sisters was deaf, and I learned for her, he says, and Ellie's smile pulls one onto Izuku's face as well. I can't speak, that's why I sign, Izuku says, and the boy nods. What's your name? Kirishima Aijuru, he says, orange eyes hopeful and scared and a little uncertain. The first time Kirishima comes to the dojo with them, he's so nervous his scales fade. They're a pale rose color instead of the vibrant maroon, and Ellie has to reassure him for almost 5 minutes before he's willing to enter. He huddles behind Izuku, who's been attending the dojo long enough he feels completely comfortable. Ellie goes to greet the sensei while Izuku leads Kirishima to a corner of the mat and sits him down to stretch out. I promise you're welcome here, Izuku signs, crouching in front of him. I'm happy you're here. Everything is going to be okay, I promise. Kirishima takes a few deep breaths before offering a wobbly smile and nod. I trust you, he whispers, and Izuku can't explain the feeling that wells up in his stomach, so he decides to think about it later. He smiles at Kirishima and settles down next to him, gently moving his tail aside so he doesn't sit on it. Ellie joins them in a moment and they go through their stretching routine, chatting sparsely as other people file onto the mat. Today we'll be focusing on predicting our opponent's movements and countering them, Sensei says, standing in the center of the mat. She smiles in their direction before calling an assistant up with her, and demonstrates how it is possible to move with your opponent to defeat them and different signs they may give. She dismisses them to work in small groups after displaying the moves she wants the students to work on. Did you catch all of that? Ellie asks, turning to Kirishima. He looks anxious again but nods, scratching the back of his neck with his blunt claws. Izuku can understand his fear and trepidation, he knows it, maybe too well, and very briefly pats his shoulder to try and reassure him. Kirishima gives him a weak smile. I think so, he mumbles. They all get to their feet together, Izuku running the throws over and over again in his head. He plays through the footwork, angles, positioning in relation to the other person. His analytical mind turns them over as he examines the point of rotation and center of gravity, rewrites them for a person of his stature, for Kirishima's tail, for Ellie's crooked stance. Here's how we'll do it, he signs, and Kirishima and Ellie tilt their heads toward his as he describes the modified throws to them. 30 seconds later, Ellie hits the mat with a resounding smack and groan. Izuku grins down at him so wide his cheeks hurt, and Ellie can't bite back an answering smile. Kirishima watches carefully. His eyes are wide and he's relaxed, his tail twitching with interest like a cat's. He practically jumps up when his turn to throw Ellie comes around. Izuku steps up next to him to help, but Kirishima's eyes are sharp and he settles into a balanced defensive stance immediately. His tail acts as a third point of balance, resting gently against the mat just out of reach of Ellie. Izuku is surprised to see how casually, how easily Kirishima readies himself for a fight. It makes Izuku uncomfortable to see a boy his age with that look in his eyes, and he takes a reassessing look over the muscles smooth under Kirishima's patterned scales. Ellie feints one way and swings the other, his lean body strong and moving low. Izuku watches Kirishima's quads tense, his shoulders pull in, when he shifts fluidly and catches Ellie's swing, seeing through his feint. Again, Ellie's back hits the mat and he groans louder, splays out on the spongy ground. "How are you so good?" he whines, and Kirishima crouches down next to him, his brow furrowed in worry. Izuku tries and fails to keep from laughing, and Ellie mock glares at him in betrayal. I'm sorry I threw you so hard," he says, dark hair frilling up like a fluffy cat in its ponytail. Ellie shakes it off good-naturedly and grins, reaching a hand out for aid in getting up, and when Kirishima reaches down, Ellie clasps his wrist and heaves, throwing him onto the ground. Kirishima yelps and rolls. He lands on his feet like a cat, smacks Ellie in the face with his tail. They both look frazzled, eyes wide and startled, and Ellie has a red mark on his nose. Izuku can't help it, can't restrain himself, and bursts out in laughter. Kirishima immediately starts apologizing again, hoisting Ellie to his feet with ease, and Izuku finds himself on his knees as his laughter cripples him. He manages to calm down in a few moments, taking deep breaths and wiping tears away, and finally manages to look up at Ellie and Kirishima. They're watching him with matching grins, soft adoration in their eyes and slowing the orbit of their fields, and Izuku smiles broadly up at them. And Midoriya is applying to UA too? Izuku hears, and instantly lunges out of his seat as Bakugu's heart rate erupts in tempo. He hits the ground just as Bakugu cracks the desk in two, explosions wreathing him in a dangerous glow and smoke. The classroom erupts in chaos. "What the F?" Bakugu snarls, looming over Izuku. "Does that mean?" Izuku swallows roughly. He knows Bakugu doesn't know sign, and answering him may just cause more problems, because it's true, he is applying to UA. He had been hoping to keep it a secret for more than the first few weeks of the school year, though. "I want to become a hero," Izuku signs, and Bakugu's palms go pop pop pop. "Think talk for once in your life," he hisses, taking a step closer, and Izuku scrambles back and away, fear sending low thrums of his power down through his arms. His breath hitches as Bakugu kicks the remains of his desk out of the way. "Who do you think you are?" Bakugu breathes, venom in his eyes. "You think you're as good as me? You, a killer, a monster, you think you can become a hero? Don't make me effing laugh." And Izuku bites his tongue and tries to hold back the threatening tears. His heart drops down to his shoes at those words, down and down and down, right through the floor. He's not sure it stops once it hits the center of the earth. I want to be," Izuku signs, feebly holding on to the belief Ellie and Kirishima have instilled in the past months, and Bakugu swoops down to grab his collar in his dangerous hands, sending a panicked yelp through Izuku's chest. "Effing you talk." He yells, tries to lift Izuku off the ground, and seems to do a double take at his deceptively heavy weight. But the confusion doesn't last long, and he drops Izuku onto the tiled floor and slams his hands together in a bang that sends Izuku's pulse racing. "So you've been working out? Training?" Bakugu sneers, and Izuku wants to curl into a small ball and shut down, but he doesn't. He doesn't because he has been training, has been working out, he's stronger, smarter, faster than he's ever been. Then Bakugu knows, he wants to become a hero, he's going to, and Bakugu can take that fat ego and shove it up his. "Go to hell," Izuku signs with shaking hands, and Bakugu might not understand sign, but the defiance and anger on Izuku's face is enough to tell him that his usual intimidation techniques of being loud and an a-hole aren't working. His face screws up, lips pulling back over his teeth, and Izuku can only take a deep breath and steel himself. He doesn't want to get hit, doesn't want to get hurt, but more than that he's scared and furious and so FNG tired of being bullied and pushed around and beat up and for once he just wants to fight back. Bakugu's fist comes down and Izuku feels his quirk like a carbonated drink, bubbling and frothing and just as furious as him, and he squeezes his eyes shut and grits his teeth, flings his hand up, and Bakugu never hits him. This time it's not Ellie, this time, Bakugu's fist stops at open air inches from Izuku's hand, and a fluttering gold and green web of filigree lightning appears between for a split second before Bakugu is thrown back. He hits a few desks and bowls over another student, and any chance the teacher had of calming the students down disappears. Kids erupt in jeers and yelling as Izuku slowly gets to his feet, light like embroidery flickering across his knuckles. Izuku's never seen his quirk do this, never seen a reaction like this, but he feels the way he's warping his own electric field. For a moment his heart stutters, jumps, and then falls into sync with the hum of power through his veins, and Izuku takes a deep breath and lets the feeling wash over him. Bakugo explodes up from the ground with a yell, his face furious and field seething more than Izuku's ever felt. He launches himself forward, and for a second Izuku entertains the idea of fighting Bakugo, bends his knees and brings his fists up to his ears, leans forward, eyes fixed on Bakugo's enraged ones. Come on, come on, come on, one more step, just one, come on dash. That's enough of that, the principal says, catching Bakugo by the back of his collar and hauling him away from Izuku. For a moment Izuku feels frozen, blood still furiously pumping in preparation for the fight, eyes still fixed on the direction Bakugo had approached from. Slowly, sound returns to him. Unbelievable, get your effing ash. Bakugo twists and spits like an animal in the principal's hold, eyes on fire and unwavering. He tries to lunge forward, hands outstretched. Deku, I'll kill you. He yells, and the principal sighs loudly and begins to drag Bakugo from the room. Izuku can only stare, dumbfounded at the chain of events. Midoriya, if you'll be so kind as to follow me, the principal says, glancing over his shoulder, and Izuku bustles into packing his bag and hurrying after him. The classroom is silent until he steps out of the room and then it bursts into noise. The teacher has no luck with calming anyone down. Izuku is left in a chair outside the principal's office. He can't hear much of the lecture Bakugo is surely receiving, and he doesn't try to listen in. He's far too preoccupied with scribbling down what his quirk just did. Energy field green-gold like a net cause? Emotions, duress, anger. Flickered like lightning, only visible when Bakugo came in contact with it. Source, me? My electric field? Threw Bakugo back with equal greater force than was exerted. Kinetic energy? Rebound? Hypothesis. Electrons created light with changing orbits, pure energy accumulated. Can I HRNSS this? Izuku stares down at his notes, suddenly at a loss. The last bullet point glares up at him. For so long he fought with himself over his quirk, and how he could possibly be a hero when all it seemed good for was killing people and messing with electric circuits. But he could use this. Manipulating energy, manipulating the collection of energy, enables both close-range and long-range combat. He could, something heavy and hopeful curdles in his stomach. He could do this, he could really be a hero, he could be a hero. Unsurprisingly, tears sting his eyes, and Izuku furiously wipes them away. Yui doesn't seem like some distant fever dream anymore. For the first time, Yui suddenly seems possible. Being a hero suddenly seems possible. Midoriya, if you could join us, the principal says, opening his door wide in invitation. There's something Bakugo would like to say to you. And just like that, his good mood shrivels up. Guess I'll just die, he thinks miserably. An insincere apology and mounting tension later, Izuku escapes out of the principal's office and sets off quickly across the school. Ellie is in a different homeroom, and if Izuku is going to meet him at the usual time he'll need to book it. It turns out news of the fight have already spread, because Izuku hears other students chatting about it and showing each other something on their phones. He can only hope it's not photos or videos, because Bakugo will definitely lose it. Ellie is waiting for him and tapping his foot impatiently, instantly rounds on Izuku when he arrives and pats him up and down to check for injuries. You fought Bakugo? He signs, looking across between angry, worried, and proud. Honestly, his face just looks like it's confused. Izuku feels warm with the concern. Not really a fight, Izuku answers. Ellie just looks more concerned, and gives Izuku another once-over for any injuries. He can't even be mad about it, because Bakugo has beaten the shit out of him on more than one occasion. He explains swiftly as they leave school for home, pulling his notebook out so Ellie can read over his notes. Ellie looks thoughtful reading them, and contemplates the whole ordeal and results in silence until they meet up with Kirishima. Izuku recognizes the big thoughts are happening right now and the results may be absolute chaos. Face, and lets his friend ruminate in silence. He explains what happened again to Kirishima, whose distaste for Bakugo seems to grow every day. Literally no one does anything? He asks, and his brow gets all crumpled up when Izuku shakes his head. He kicks a pebble out of his way with enough force to send it sailing across the road and screws his face up. I guess I have to fight Bakugo now, he mutters, linking his hands in his backpack straps, and jumps when Izuku squawks. He turns with wide eyes as Izuku frantically shakes his head. No, that is a bad idea, you should not. He signs, hands bumping and fumbling in his haste. He can tolerate Bakugo's cruelty because it's casual bullying. Rarely is Bakugo ever truly trying to do mass damage. He knows that wouldn't be the case in a fight. Bakugo wouldn't hold back. It terrifies him to imagine Kirishima or Ellie getting stuck in an all-out fight with Bakugo, and he tells him so. Still, Kirishima looks doubtful. My quirk is kind of made for it, though, Kirishima says, then adds, taking hits, that is. Izuku feels his stomach drop, and multicolored lights pop into existence along his forearms as his quirk answers his distress. He can't explain the ugly feeling that ensnares his chest when thinking about Kirishima taking hits, his beautiful scales crumpling, fracturing, blood like rust against the white patterns. Bad idea. That is a bad idea. He signs, repeating bad several times for emphasis. Kirishima holds his hands up in capitulation, but Izuku suspects it's only to get him to calm down before he explodes, or something. Will you tell me about your quirk? Kirishima signs, diverting the conversation, and Izuku's anxiety over Kirishima's self-sacrifice doesn't lessen much, but he allows it. I think I can manipulate electron configuration, he signs excitedly, and Kirishima is swiftly enraptured. The lights are photons being released, and I can accumulate energy from it. I might be able to influence kinetic energy in an electric field, too. Kirishima is silent for a few moments before yelling, "That's so cool," and grabbing Izuku up in a bear hug. He spins around a few times, Izuku stunned into laughter, before finally releasing him. I'm so happy for you, bro, Kirishima says, orange eyes bright and a little teary. I'm so happy your quirk is something that excites you now. And that makes Izuku pause because it's right. He is excited about his quirk. For once, dread and guilt aren't at the forefront of his mind. And that, Izuku doesn't know what to do with that. That's it. Ellie suddenly shouts, bringing his fist down into his open palm. Kirishima and Izuku both jump and spin to face him. They're all gathered under an overpass a short distance from the school. I know how to build your hero costume, Izuku, he says, field welling up like a dust storm in its excitement. Kirishima whoops and lifts Izuku up onto his shoulders, carrying him home like that, and Izuku imagines himself holding the sun in his hands, heart warm with laughter. Minutes later, a villain erupts out of a manhole cover and searches desperately for a vessel. He's captured in a few empty soda bottles and carted to the nearest police station, and All Might returns to his lonely apartment to hack up blood and force himself to eat. His hands shake badly. For some reason he feels as if he's missed something important. In another world, another story, a child of hope would have inherited the strength of the stars. In another world, Toshinori would have a son. This is not quite that story. Sundays quickly become Izuku's favorite day of the week. There are no classes, no sports or clubs, and Ellie and Kirishima arrive early in the morning after everyone's respective workouts. From then, the day is theirs. After Izuku's new discovery about his quirk days previously, most of the approaching Sunday is devoted to research and practical use. Now see if you can hit the target, Ellie calls, backing away from a giant archery target he stole, repurposed from the school. Izuku takes a deep breath and braces his feet. He measures the distance in his head and quickly calculates the force he'd need to reach the target. 20 yards isn't that far, but this is the first time he's tried to use his quirk long range. His stomach is twisted into knots. Don't worry, buddy, Kirishima whispers, bracing himself behind Izuku. He's there in case there's serious kickback. I've got your back. If anything goes wrong, we'll handle it together. Izuku nods and attempts a smile, tries to take a few deep breaths. This could go really badly. For a moment he reconsiders this, They're alone in the middle of the forest on the outskirts of the park. His mom doesn't know what they're doing and they're far away from anyone else. What if this goes horribly wrong? What if he messes up or catches the forest on fire? What if he hurts Ellie or Kirishima? What if he kills them? Izuku swallows, his skin crawling with anxiety, and decides to tell his friends the experiment is off, but when he looks up, Ellie is standing a safe distance away, eyes soft and smile sad, like he knows exactly what Izuku is thinking. It's okay, he signs, you won't hurt us. I trust you. And Izuku wants to ask him how he possibly could, knowing what Izuku's done, but Ellie just smiles and nods to him, and Kirishima's warm hands settle on Izuku's shoulder and hip, and he suddenly can't back down. Not when his friends have given so much, done so much for him. It would be an insult to their trust in him. Get ready, Izuku signs to Ellie, and his eyes light up. Harden as much as you can, Kiri. Ellie calls, and ducks behind a beat-up car door he found somewhere. He peeks out the window, dark eyes wide with curiosity from behind scuffed welding goggles. Izuku can feel Kirishima change, his hands growing heavier and stiffer on his back, and hears the sound of scales sliding against one another. When all is silent for a few seconds, Kirishima squeezes Izuku gently in a go-ahead. Izuku takes a deep breath, as deep as he can, and holds it. He can do this. He extends his right arm straight out at the target, hand open and fingers loose. He uses his left hand to grip his forearm and brace it. He's trembling badly. Izuku is terrified if he's being honest. All he can hear is Bakugo calling him a killer, the look on his classmates' faces when they heard what happened, the whispered, freak, and weirdo, and monster. But despite all of that, there's an iron resolve, something hot and firm and thrumming like a pulse, and Izuku can't back down. Never will, with Ellie and Kirishima backing him. He fixes his eyes on the target and recalls the rush of power through his arm when Bakugo attacked him, lets it swell in his palm, erupt through his skin in a shower and swirl of gold and green sparks. He feels the energy mount, build in the cradle of his curled fingers. Something like liquid light races up and down his arm, to his shoulder and down his legs, back up his left arm until it's a running loop. Izuku remembers something about closed circuits and the conductivity of the human body but can't focus on that. He lets himself feel the energy, forces himself to commit to memory the way his electric field warps around his hand. He can feel himself gathering electrons, attracting them to harvest the energy they unwittingly discard. Izuku lets out a slow breath through gritted teeth. He focuses on the target. His fingers spasm, and then he releases the energy he's accumulated. He's able to experience his arms simultaneously exploding and being charred for seconds before he's literally punted directly into unconsciousness. Mean, testing his quirk? Izuku hears, wiggling closer and closer to the blur of lights he thinks is consciousness. The concern in the woman's voice is that his mom instantly ignites Izuku's anxiety. Why does his mother sound so scared? What's going on? His quirk did something it never has before, and he wanted to experiment with it, Ellie says, voice sounding beaten down and slurred for some reason. Izuku doesn't like that, not one bit, and he tries to claw his way to wakefulness faster. He breaks through the clouded fog holding him down like lead and is instantly assaulted by several different colliding electric fields. He flinches from the exposure and whines at the pain that lashes through him. Izuku? Izuku! His mom gasps, and in seconds he feels her cool fingers against half of his feverish face. For some reason he can't feel most of the right side of his face. It's stiff and unyielding and numb. He only briefly notes Ellie saying, "I'll get a nurse," and disappearing from the room, too occupied with the multiple signals his body is assaulting him with. His mother is a blur of tan skin and green hair above him, the lights behind her glaring and painful. "Don't move, baby, okay? Just lie still," she whispers, fingers running through his hair, and he makes another low sound in the back of his throat. His jaw is too stiff to move, and as he gains awareness his anxiety mounts. His right arm is numb and tense like half his face, and his rib cage and shoulder are awash in tenderness. Izuku takes a deep breath and groans a little at the twinge in the right side of his chest. His mother fusses over him, hands gentle and kind against his abused body. Midoriya is awake? Someone asks, stepping into the room. It takes Izuku a moment to realize he's in a hospital, and the person is a doctor. It's hard to think with how muddled his thoughts are. Why is he in a hospital? Where's Kiri? What happened? Hello, young man, the doctor says, bending over Izuku with a smile. Their several eyes crinkle at the corners. You're pretty beat up. Gave the emergency crew quite a scare. Izuku only half registers their words, not really caring about what they have to say about him. He wants to know where Aijuru is, and he wants to... You're probably wondering what happened. Well, as you might be able to tell, your right arm is braced and numbed. After 2 surgeries, we were able to piece your bones back together and replace your joints, the doctor says, and suddenly Izuku is listening. Surgeries? Replace his joints? What the F? He fingerspells what with his left hand, and his mother wipes at her tear-filled eyes. Your arms, sweetheart, she says shakily. You broke it really badly earlier, and it took a while for Kirishima to get you to the hospital. There's nerve damage and your elbow joint and wrist had to be replaced. It might be, you might not be able to use it again. Izuku's breathing hitches. Not use his right arm again? No, this can't be happening. Is this the end? Is this how it all ends? A dumb mistake destroying everything? His heart monitor kicks up and he has to grapple with his quirk to keep from blowing the screen out. Ellie steps closer and rests a hand against his shoulder. He can feel the heat of it through his thin gown. Izuku's anxiety abates momentarily, but then he gets a look at Ellie's face. His vision has cleared enough to see the thick bandage over one eye and the row of stitches above his eyebrow. Bruises crawl along the side of his face and his nose is clearly broken. Your shoulder was dislocated and your humerus fractured in several locations, but luckily your arm was the extent of your injuries. The doctor says cheerfully. Izuku suddenly hates them. Your ribs will be sore and your shoulder, but you've escaped with some interesting scars. Count yourself lucky, young man, they add, and Izuku swallows bile. He doesn't feel lucky. He feels like his world is crashing down on top of him. As soon as the doctor steps out of the room, he turns to Ellie. He knows he's just giving his mother's ire more time to build, but he has to know what happened. Ellie seems to have predicted this and is sitting, gingerly holding his arm in a sling. There was too much energy, Ellie says, his strange speech explained by the bruises. The blowback was bad. Really bad. My goggles shattered and the car door knocked me out. When I came to, your arm dash, he swallows and bows his head. Izuku edges closer and gently rests his hand on Ellie's scalp. Izuku's stomach is a yawning chasm of fear and anxiety. Your arm looked like a charred sack of gristle, he forces out, I squeezed shut. Izuku feels numb. You were burned all over, on your arm, your face, your chest. I thought you were dash, Ellie voice hiccups and he takes a deep breath. I thought you were dead. And Kiri dash, Izuku's heart stops, drops, and rolls right out of his bruised chest. Something hollow and ugly begins to fester in his stomach at the hesitancy in Ellie's voice, his pause. His hand that was on your shoulder, it was charred and broken, and some of his fingers were dash, Ellie cuts off and groans low in his throat. Izuku's mom moves to stand behind him, her hands soothing on his shoulders. His arm and his face were hurt too, but he had caught you after the kick. His scales were, and his ear, God. And Ellie swallows and buries his face in his good hand, and tries to keep from crying or retching or both. Izuku feels empty. His chest is cold and damp, and his heart feels like it's atrophying where it's cradled between his lungs. Is this his destiny? To just aimlessly destroy, to hurt everyone close to him? Did he kill Kirishima? Did he kill one of his best friends? He carried us to the hospital, Ellie whispers. His hand is trembling. I couldn't walk with my concussion, but he just held you in his good arm and supported all of my weight and dragged us here. All on his own. The room falls into silence. Izuku can't look at Ellie or his mom. He had promised himself that he wouldn't do this again, wouldn't hurt someone with his quirk ever again, yet here is Ellie, bruised and stitched together, and Kirishima, where is he? Where he finger spells, and his mom leans over and brushes a strand of hair out of his eyes. It's the general hospital, sweetheart, she says, and Izuku shakes his head and signs Kiri, and she understands. He's in the next room, she says, and seems to comprehend the terror that has its claws in his heart. You didn't kill him, Izuku. He's going to be fine. You're all going to be fine. He's going to be fine. He's going to be fine. Izuku's head hits his pillow and he struggles to SCK in a full breath. He squeezes his eyes shut and bites back the sobs that throw him about like a boat on stormy seas. Kiri is going to be okay. He's going to be okay. Izuku didn't kill his friend. Aijuru is going to be okay. Aijuru will be okay. Ellie sniffles, lies his head on Izuku's arm, and his warm tears join Izuku's in their fall. They'll be okay. 2 months later. Learning to write left-handed is a pain. In this house, we respect women. Izuku throws his pen down and leans back in his chair with a sigh. His right hand spasms around the gripmaster he's using, but he finishes his set before setting it down. Across the room, Ellie throws darts at a piece of paper taped to the wall to adjust to the depth perception of having only one functional eye, and Kiri paints the nails of his 3 remaining fingers on his right hand. Lucky Sheet was already left-handed. Want food? Izuku signs stiffly when Kiri glances up. Both Ellie and Kiri clamor for lunch, and follow Izuku into the kitchen to aid in gathering food. Mamadoriya, as Kiri and Ellie have affectionately dubbed Inko, is asleep in her room after a night shift at the hospital, so everyone takes care to be silent. They shuttle the rice and little sandwiches back into Izuku's room and cluster around the open laptop on the floor. A video is on the screen, muted but with subtitles, and Izuku scratches crooked notes into a notebook titled Volume 13, Analysis. They haven't given up, despite the aftermath. Every time Izuku looks at Kiri or Ellie, he's swamped in guilt. A scar breaks Ellie's dark skin, a thick slash above his eyebrow, and around his eye is pockmarked from the shattered goggles he was wearing. His blind eye is a pale amber. Kiri has a starburst scar on his face, just like Izuku's, but it spreads up from his jaw and chin to cut through his eye. It leaves a raised pink mark bumpy from his melted scales, and all that's left of his right ear is a few shredded bumps of cartilage. He lost 2 fingers, and across his knuckles and up his wrist is the same scar tissue as on his face. All of his fingers and his wrist bear the scars of the reconstruction surgery. Izuku's right arm isn't ever going to be the same. Despite the results, despite the aftermath, Kiri and Ellie had refused to leave Izuku. They had seen, had experienced, the terror and force of his quirk themselves. And yet they won't leave him, and they won't let him abandon his dream of being a hero. In the months following the incident there had been many arguments and tears, but they hadn't folded until Izuku finally agreed to still apply to Yui a few days prior. He still has his guilt and his reservations, but only his therapist hears those. Are we going to the park today? Ellie signs, gathering his used dishes in a neat pile. Kiri nods and they both glance at Izuku. It's been the same thing every day as the 3 of them recovered. They've been homeschooled for the past few months, and once they're done they come over to Izuku's to train or hang out. Izuku has yet to use his quirk again. He doesn't know if he's ready, but time is running out. There's barely 4 months left to the entrance exam. Izuku's anxiety mounts every single day, and he knows Ellie and Kiri are itching to get back to training as well. They've all recovered as much as they're going to, but Izuku shakes his head. I found somewhere else. Izuku signs, watches the crestfallen expression on their faces change to ones of puzzlement. Izuku might not ever be able to go back to the park, just thinking about it sends something dark and painful swooping through his chest, but on his morning run a week ago, he had found something that might be a good substitute. They all move at once, changing from sweatpants into athletic clothes. Ellie, as always, pulls on his infamous pair of red shorts with "Are you nasty?" emblazoned across the butt. They're very short. Izuku ducks into the bathroom swiftly to grab a few hair ties and gets trapped in his own gaze. The face in the mirror is one he's grown up with but hardly recognizes. After the horrible malfunction of his quirk a few months ago, he's avoided his reflection at all costs. It fills him with guilt and self-hatred to remember what he did to Kirishima and Ellie. His face is marred like Kirishima's, a pale starburst scar crawling up the side of his neck and along his cheek. It reaches the hollow under his eye, next to his nose, and left a few notches in his eyebrow. His ear and eye were spared, though, because his body was designed to be resilient to the blowback of his quirk. Izuku clenches his fists. He grabs the hair ties with too much force in his stiff right hand and returns to the bedroom. His mood is soured, and ugly thoughts ricochet through his head. Kirishima and Ellie both notice and seem to understand. Kiri comes up and wraps Izuku in a big hug, nestles his face in the green tangle of Izuku's hair. His fingers fumble in Kirishima's shirt before knotting in it and holding tight. Ellie comes from behind, and Izuku is just the small middle of a Midoriya sandwich. It's Kiri and Ellie's patented move. It doesn't fix things, doesn't get rid of the yelling in Izuku's head, but it helps. It always helps to feel that Kirishima and Ellie are both still here, both still mostly whole. Kirishima pulls back and ducks his head down to look onto Izuku's eyes. He's got a crooked smile, slanted from the scar tissue, but somehow he's still just as cheerful, just as beautiful. He ruffles his hand through Izuku's hair before straightening. Ellie is a warm and reassuring presence at Izuku's back, and he squeezes him before moving across the room to throw a notebook and some extra clothes in a backpack. They sneak out of the house, silently grabbing water bottles and protein bars from the kitchen. Once they leave the house, they erupt in noise. Kirishima shifts with sickening cracks and pops, falling forward onto all fours, his back legs changing until they're definitely more lizard-like. He springs forward, nearly bowling Ellie over, who yelps and shakes his fist like an old man. Izuku laughs and leaps forward. For a moment, he forgets the destruction his quirk has wrought, and feels the familiar frothing in his limbs as he leaps. He flies through the air, lights sparking and winking around his legs, and revels in the power in his veins. Green and gold lightning flickers in an embrace, and Izuku feels like he could steal the sun from the sky. He could become the sun in the sky. They come to Izuku's planned destination a short while later. This was the first time they had been out of the house all day, and their energy seemed boundless. Kirishima had let Ellie climb onto his back and direct his course through the city, even capitulating to his demands of sick butt parkour, Godzilla edition. Izuku had tried his hand at it as well and found, to his delight, that he is excellent at it. The application of his quirk that he's dubbed entropy allows for the rapid accumulation and use of energy, which Izuku can distribute throughout his body, allowing him to do physical stunts he's only dreamed of. Ellie had called him Edgy for the name and told him that a better name was Human Battery. Izuku hadn't graced him with a response. They come to Dagoba Beach with plenty of hours left in the day. Both Ellie and Kirishima have bewildered expressions on their faces as they observe the mountains of trash, and Izuku has to admit that's warranted. It's not the prettiest sight. This place is virtually empty, so we won't risk injuring anyone, Izuku signs, and we won't get in trouble either, goes unsaid. None of them had enjoyed the chastising they received from law enforcement while in the hospital. It's a high-stakes obstacle course, rescue scenario, and gym all at once. He adds, and Kirishima and Ellie seem to begin to comprehend Izuku's line of thinking. Plus, we can clean it up, right? Kirishima asks, glancing at the other two. Then people will be able to enjoy it again. He looks genuinely excited at the idea of helping other people, and Izuku is abruptly reminded of how good of a person Kiri is. I think I'm in love with you, bro, Ellie says, mock wiping away a tear. You really are a ray of sunshine. Kirishima rolls his eyes and gently punches Ellie's shoulder, but he's blushing. I just want to help. He insists, and Izuku and Ellie share a smile. Kiri huffs and crosses his arms in a pout, resembling a puppy despite his lizardiness. Ellie suddenly tackles him, and they crash into the sand of the beach with a yelp. Just as quickly Ellie is back on his feet and sprinting away, yelling, "Tag, you're it," over his shoulder. Izuku instantly takes off in another direction, green lightning flickering into existence as he picks up speed. Behind him, there's crashes and whoops as Kirishima barrels through piles of rusted metal and Ellie transforms appliances at will. Izuku clears a car with a hop, and in front of him stretches the ocean, glittering and fathomless. He can't explain the sudden feeling in his stomach, heavy and weightless all at once. It feels a bit like hope, but more assured. More concrete. The three of them return to school the following week, finally cleared from whatever physical limitations the doctor had given them that they had ignored, and, needless to say, Izuku is less than pleased. Somehow everyone has heard about him literally blowing his arm up. Also, he had more than enjoyed his 2 Bakugo-less months. Deku, he hears at the end of class, and Izuku dips right out of there. He swings his backpack over his shoulder and pops the window open in one motion, managing to hop onto the ledge before Bakugo catches up to him and yanks him back from the 2-story drop. Damn it. Stop FING running, Bakugo growls, leaning over Izuku. He's really starting to hate Bakugo's obsession with throwing him onto the floor, and glares balefully up at his bully. I heard you blew yourself up and your dumbass friends too, he tells him, and Izuku has to resist the urge to roll his eyes. Almost everyone he's seen in school has said the exact same thing to him. Bakugo isn't as special as he thinks. And though it hurts, though the reminder hurts like an ache in his bones, he knows better than to listen to their words. For a moment, Izuku asks himself why he's suddenly not afraid of Bakugo anymore, but he realizes that's not quite true. The fear is still there, still sends his pulse racing and grips his neck like a noose, but there's something else, too. Something deep and dark and very still, and Izuku thinks it might be fury. Bakugo grabs his right arm and wrenches it up, and Izuku realizes he must have missed his monologuing. Oops. Bakugo pushes his sleeve back, stares in disgust at his crooked fingers, scarred hand, the starburst scars that litter his forearm like freckles. The surgery scars stand out, purple incisions along his joints. His skin really is like a quilt. You're too weak to even control your quirk, Bakugo sneers, and throws Izuku's arm down like it's personally offended him. Knowing him, it probably has. Just do everyone a favor and take a swan dive off the roof. Maybe in your next life you'll get a quirk you can handle. And though Izuku's been tuning most of what Bakugo has set out, this strikes something deep and painful in his stomach. It catches on the self-hatred and dark thoughts Izuku's tried to bury and throws up sparks, and unbidden he sees Kirishima, just weeks after they'd met, hollow and tired, jagged red marks lining the insides of his arms. Izuku remembers his gasping whispers, the way Kirishima had curled in on himself as he admitted how much he hurt sometimes, how he just wanted to. Izuku feels very, very cold, and very still, and before he can think it through he swings and punches Bakugo in the nose. His green lightning illuminates the shock on his face. Bakugo isn't expecting it and falls back, lands on his butt with an oomph. His 2 lackeys that had been hovering stare in surprise, and Izuku uses the moment of shock to scramble to his feet and vault over Baku. Light streaks after him as he bullets out of the classroom into the empty hall, and he laughs, when he hears Bakugo's roar. Ellie is waiting by the doors for him as usual, and glances up with wide eyes as Izuku comes barreling around the corner. He hears the following explosions and sighs. Really? He asks as Izuku approaches him at a sprint. The first day back? Really? Izuku offers him a sheet-eating grin and scoops him up, barely slowing his pace as they burst out of the main doors. Ellie just loops his arms around his neck and sighs again, used to being carried by now. They lose Bakugo a few streets later, Izuku's speed and mobility unparalleled with the energy racing through his body. They slow near the overpass where they usually meet Kirishima, and Izuku finally lets Ellie down. He stretches and pretends someone half a foot shorter than him didn't just carry him a mile. What did you do? Ellie asks, offering his water bottle to Izuku, who chugs half of it in one go. His mood darkens quickly at the question, but he tries to keep it from showing on his face. Bakugo told me to kill myself, Izuku says, and Ellie's face goes blank so quickly it's like Izuku blinks. For a moment Ellie is very still, his field swirling at its usual pace, but then it explodes in an enraged burst, ugly red catching like flames. Ellie is furious. It's okay, I punched him, Izuku signs, cutting in front of Ellie as he attempts to stomp back in the direction of the school. Ellie's fists are white-knuckled, and underneath their feet the asphalt wiggles and shakes. Please calm down, I'm okay, I promise, Izuku signs, grabs Ellie's biceps when he doesn't respond. Ellie's eyes flick to his quickly, wide and mismatched, and he bares his teeth. He doesn't get to say that, Ellie snarls, voice low and dangerous. He doesn't have a FING right to say that he doesn't dash, and he takes a deep breath and the ground solidifies again under their feet. He takes another few deep breaths and Izuku does too, his anxiety slowly dying down. Kirishima arrives then, immediately reads the tension and freezes, his eyes flicking between Ellie and Izuku. It hurts Izuku to see him so wary. "Everything okay, guys?" he asks, and before Izuku can assure him, Ellie says, "Bakugo told Izuku to kill himself," in that same low tone, and Kiri jerks like he was electrocuted. His face is painfully neutral, casual, and Izuku takes a step towards him when he lets out a slow, shuddering breath. "All right," Kirishima says evenly, and exchanges a look with Ellie. "Guess I have to kill him now," and Izuku jumps forward and shakes his head wildly. He doesn't want them to fight, doesn't want Kirishima to get in trouble or get hurt, doesn't want Ellie to have to fight someone ever again. "Dude," Kiri says, stepping close to Izuku and squishing his cheeks between his palms. "You are sunshine incarnate. You are a sunshine child. You are the best and brightest thing in this world. Bakugo doesn't get to say that to you, okay?" And Izuku wants to object. Wants to say that Bakugo doesn't get to say that for Kiri's sake, not his own, but then Ellie leans his elbow on Izuku's head and chimes in. "I've only known you for a year, but if something happened to you, I would kill everyone in this city and then myself," Ellie says, and Izuku wants to groan at the reference to a centuries-old show, but he doesn't. He doesn't because he understands that his friends are trying to tell him that he's important and deserves better, and the abuse he suffers isn't okay, and that means the entire world to him. They mean the entire world to him. He pulls them into a hug and buries his face in Kiri's chest, curses his overactive tear ducts as his eyes burn. Sometimes it stings, the lots they've drawn in life. Sometimes it hurts more than Izuku can bear to think about, knowing the awful things his friends have had to live through, the things he's had to live through. But none of that killed them, and that's what matters. Izuku pulls back and smiles widely up at Kirishima and Ellie, and they have smiles just as wide for him. They all turn to head back to Izuku's house, Kiri's shoulders losing their tension and Ellie's field dying down to the usual gold. Izuku puts Bakugo out of his mind and hitches his backpack a little higher on his shoulders. He has far more important things to focus on. The UA entrance exam is fast approaching. Izuku wakes up to a shrieking alarm and almost falls off of his bed trying to turn it off. He slumps back onto his pillow face first and nearly slips back into sleep when his mom knocks on his door. "Make sure you stop for breakfast, Izuku," she calls. "You want to have plenty of energy for your big day." Before continuing down the hall. "Big day? What big day? It's just a Saturday, so what? Oh shit, the entrance exam." Izuku literally flings himself out of bed and comes up from the ground in a roll. He only spares a glance at his phone and sees Kiri and Ellie blowing up their group chat. "Chanks, it's the Truama. 9:52 p.m. Mighty boy, good night, Carrot. Carrot. Theta Epsilon Theta Winky Face, good night all. Hardman Candyman, night friends. 6:56 a.m. Theta Epsilon Theta Winky Face, Hardman Candyman, Theta Epsilon Theta Winky Face, exam. Hardman Candyman, exam. Theta Epsilon Theta Winky Face, exam. Hardman Candyman, examdich. Hardman Candyman, Izuku 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 Izu. Hardman Candyman, im so sx ard reassure me pellis. Theta Epsilon Theta Winky Face, Izuku please Jeffchkiop. Theta Epsilon Theta Winky Face, the sun has yet to rise fgas oh no. Hardman Candyman. Izuku stops for a moment and smiles fondly at his friend's antics. He knows that deep down, though they're nervous, this is their attempt to take his mind and nerves off of himself. He tends to get hyper-focused on his anxiety and this is how they help him avoid that. They're thinking of him first. Izuku opens his phone as he pulls out his clothes for the exam and types swiftly. 6:59 a.m. Might boy, you guys are gonna do great. I believe in you. Might boy, just do your best. That's what matters. Theta Epsilon Theta Winky Face, the sun has risen, my crops? Why stirred? Theta Epsilon Theta Winky Face, my skin, clear. Hardman Candyman, thanks Izuku. Hardman Candyman, I feel so much better. Theta epsilon theta winky face. Anxiety? Don't know her. Izuku laughs briefly and tucks his phone in his uniform pocket. He already has his clothes packed, and double-checks there's a notebook, his pencil bag, and a water bottle. He feels his nerves coiling in his stomach like an angry serpent. A zap of green light catches in his hair and he bats it away, and the lamp on his desk flickers wildly. Izuku forces himself to take a deep breath and lets his quirk settle to a low hum around him. He's fine. He can do this. Breakfast is the usual, but he makes sure to drink an extra glass of water. He's jittery enough that his leg doesn't stop bouncing, and his mom fusses over his hair before letting him leave the kitchen. Izuku can tell she's nervous too. She's worried about him. He brushes his teeth swiftly, ignores his reflection, and takes one last look around his room to make sure he has everything he needs. Izuku's phone is buzzing wildly in his pocket, but suddenly there's a terrifying itch under his skin, and more than anything he wants to be with his friends. He wants to be reassured with more than just their text messages. His mom catches him on his way out, handing him his bento box and straightening his uniform with little sniffles. Izuku finds his eyes stinging when faced with her tears, and he rubs at them before catching her hands in his. He offers her a bright smile, and his mom returns one. No matter how today ends, Izuku, she says, voice wobbling. I want you to know that I am proud of you. You have endured some of the worst things life can put a person through, and you are still just as kind and sweet as the day you were born. His mom's voice breaks and she takes a few deep breaths, tears escing down her cheeks. Izuku doesn't try to fight his tears this time, and his trembling lips taste salt. You are my brave little boy, and I have never loved anything as much as I love you. I know you're going to do amazing today, and it's all because of your courage and determination. She gently cups Izuku's cheek and tucks a piece of hair behind his ear. Your father, she whispers, would be so proud of you. And Izuku throws himself forward and hugs her as tight as he can, burying his face in her warm sweater. She hiccups in surprise but hugs him back as well, and she's smiling when they separate. Izuku signs I love you and his mom signs I love you too, and then Izuku is jamming his shoes onto his feet and flying out the door. He knows Kiri and Ellie are waiting for him, and so is Yue. Yue is big. The school stretches into the sky and sprawls indolently across acres of immaculate lawns and carefully maintained gardens. Izuku finds himself gawking at the opulent gates and architecture. He's never been near a place as nice as this. Beside him, Kirishima and Ellie are just as amazed. Other teenagers are streaming towards the entrance. Izuku can only look at them, take note of physical characteristics and quirk manifestations, feels dread fester at the thought of facing them in the practical exam. He feels distinctly ill. Is it too late to back out? Izuku signs, and Kiri and Ellie both immediately descend upon him with encouragement and support. Their words help, but something rotten and afraid has sunk its claws into Izuku's heart, and he fears his stubbornness is not enough. His mother was wrong, he's not brave enough for this. Warm hands slip into his and Izuku startles. On either side of him, Ellie and Kiri's dark hands hold his gently. They stand close, shoulder to shoulder, their faces set and sure. They've followed him, carried him, to this point. They've given up pieces of themselves for him, an eye, fingers, and filled in the emptiness in his heart. Izuku's never felt love like this, love that is so selfless, so against the odds. He looks up at his friends, at Ellie's mismatched eyes and Kiri's beautiful patterned scales, and feels something warm gently shift into place. He'd do anything for them, he'd give up his arm, his legs, his dream, his life, so he can sure get into UA for them. Izuku can't believe this. This can't be real, this is... First of all, Present Mike is their exam proctor. Present Mike. As in internationally recognized, radio host, hero Present Mike, Izuku is living the dream. Also, he used sign for his entire speech and explanation as he spoke. Iconic. Incredible. Izuku literally cannot process this. Second, the exam was scary easy, and he knows it isn't just him because Ellie looked just as bewildered as he felt once they handed it in. They had a quick break to eat and drink something while the students with extended time finished up, of which Kiri was included, and Ellie and Izuku took the chance to post-test panic. Why was it so easy? Izuku signs, ready to hurl himself out the window. Ellie looks like he's going to cry. I don't know. He signs back. I expected it wouldn't be too hard because we studied so much, but this feels too easy. The tile floor beneath their feet wavers, and a small potato pops into existence. Ellie and Izuku stare down at it. I'm starch stress creating. Ellie murmurs in horror. What have I come to? Izuku pats him gently on the shoulder in commiseration. A stray spark catches the edge of Ellie's uniform sleeve and Izuku pinches it before it hurt him. All around them, other students are in varying stages of post-test syndrome as well. A few seem nonchalant and relaxed, while others are in the same boat as Ellie and Izuku and losing control of their quirks from anxiety. There's a sudden commotion at the exam doors as the students with extended time emerge. Kiri finds them before they can even spot him, circling the chaos just outside the doors. He looks panicked as well, scales a pink so pale some of the white splotches blend in. His claws click against his scaly palms. That was really easy? He says, sounding unsure and scared, and Izuku and Ellie agree in an attempt to console him as they hand over a water bottle and protein bar. They'll be summoned for the practical exam in about 10 minutes. Izuku is still anxious, sparks and lights catching in his hair and flickering into existence, but being with his friends and finding they didn't have great difficulty either helps to soothe him some. Kiri and Ellie are both pillars for him, both the glue that holds his fragmented emotions and pieces all together. After they all get the initial fear of the ease of the written test, Ellie occupies the leftover time by describing some of the support items he's been dreaming up and trying to plan with the scraps from Dagoba Beach. He's in the middle of signing about polyethylene braces for Izuku to help moderate the electrical backlash of his quirk when an exam proctor calls for the students to return to the auditorium, and Izuku feels his friend's pulses stutter. The temporary relief they had gotten from the pressure of the exam dissipates, and the three of them file back into their seats towards the back. Ellie and Kiri scoot their chairs close until they press against Izuku's shoulders, and the modified Midoriya sandwich helps to calm his nerves some. Present Mike steps behind the podium at the front after all the students have been seated. Izuku notices that there are less than before the written exam. Suo! Present Mike shouts, and Izuku winces. Kiri looks in pain. You've made it past the written exam, and now it's on to the practical portion. I hope you're ready. Here's what you're up against. And Present Mike goes on to explain how there's a point system, and the kids with the most points have the best chance of getting in, and, oh yeah, they're fighting robots? Izuku feels very, very numb. This is incredible, Ellie signs, looking wide-eyed over at Izuku and Kiri. A sheet-eating grin slowly grows across his face. You've gone your whole life trying to avoid making appliances blow up, and now it's the UA practical exam? Izuku face palms and tries to swallow his despair with the universe while Kiri and Ellie cackle over his back. Really? He's legitimately spent years learning how to avoid blowing up electronics, had to have a phone specially made for him because of how wonky his electric field is, and now all he has to do is break a couple robots to get into UE? The school of his dreams? Izuku doesn't hear much of what Present Mike says, something about a time limit, 0 pointers, as he tries to rein in the bitter feeling in his chest at the irony of the universe. He could probably stand at the entrance of the practical exam and just blow up all the robots without even trying. Hysterical elation begins to ferment like rotting pomegranates in his stomach. All the students around him suddenly get to their feet and Izuku stumbles to follow them, grabbing a hold of the back of Kiri's shirt to avoid getting separated. He can feel Ellie's warm hand on the back of his shoulder. Izuku forces himself to take a deep breath. He can do this. It's time to prove that he can be a hero. The practical exam is in, of course, a fully outfitted city. Why not? They're rich. Izuku is surrounded by people he doesn't know and who surely don't know sign, so he stands off to the side and avoids eye contact. He's wearing a tank top and athletic shorts, hoping to avoid damaging his clothes, and his thick-soled sneakers. It's a warm spring day with a chilly breeze from the east making the sunlight pleasant. The other students in his section mill amongst themselves, chatting or trying to focus. Izuku sees a stern face, then bright hair, then someone with a glowing quirk, and has to look away from all the interference. The electric fields look like a wildly pulsing mass of shimmering and thrumming light. It's enough to give him a headache. And then, interrupting the suspense, Present Mike appears on a podium and startles literally everyone. To say they're all wound up is an understatement. Izuku barely has time to breathe, listen to what Present Mike has to say, and then the exam opens. There's considerably less fanfare than Izuku had expected. The gates open, a horn goes off, and he's sprinting through the doors before he even processes Present Mike's words. Izuku lets entropy light his veins up and takes off, cutting along a few side streets, invigorated by the open air and potential to wreak some havoc. For a single moment he holds his quirk at bay, lets the world filter to him through his eyes and ears and skin alone. When he closes his eyes and lets his second sight take over, he sees the world again in dazzling colors. Everything has an electric field, literally everything, even the tiniest of molecules, atoms, that float in the air. He sees all of these, sees the world in a picture made up of smaller pictures. Everything has a different color, different dance, that he's learned to recognize. Buildings are different from humans, who are different from electronics. The closest Izuku's ever come to describing this vision accurately is by comparing it to northern lights. This vision also spreads much farther than his normal sight. He can see ahead of him and all around, but it also stretches out farther, until the sight mixes into a physical sense as well. He can see the buildings all around him but farther as well, out towards the edges of the city. Izuku can see the people racing away from him, towards him, has to direct his gaze from the brightness, the vitality, of their fields. A different feeling catches his eyes and he focuses in on it, veers sharply on the street and sprints through an alley that reflects his own gold and green lightning back at him. He bursts out just behind a robot easily 4 times his side, one he recognizes as a 2-pointer, and it only takes a step or two to reach it. Izuku lunges, keeps low, and catches a few stray electrons in a fierce uppercut into the robot's back. The reaction is more than he expected, the front of the robot exploding outwards, a tunnel of energy spiraling through the air as the robot jarks and shorts out. One of its eyes explode, and Izuku notes that as a source of weakness for the circuit. He realizes, looking at his blacked and scorched fingers, that he didn't need to be so extra taking the robot out. He probably could have tapped it and had the same reaction. Do the exam proctors watch tapes? Do they also complete a quirk analysis? Izuku isn't sure exactly how this all works, but resolves to alternate between tapping and punching. Easy peasy. He takes off again in another direction, lets his second sight guide him towards robots and around people, and swiftly loses count of the points he's accumulated. By the time an announcement comes and says there's 5 minutes left, both of Izuku's palms and fingers are soot-stained, and his hair is a perpetually crackling nest of filigree lightning. He doesn't want to move near other people, but the only robots left are in the thick of the crowd, and Izuku reluctantly makes his way there. Just as he's entering the crowded intersection, something catches his second sight. He had dismissed it as a building in his glance over the city, but now he can taste the sickly buzz that tells him it's an electronic. It's a robot the size of a building? Izuku blinks away second sight, throws his eyes about as they acclimate to being used regularly, and feels his stomach roil at not being able to see the robot. He had felt it so close, can still smell the ugly burn, so where dash? Run! Someone shouts, sprinting past him. Izuku stares after them. What are they running from? It's giant. It's the 0-pointer. Another student calls, hopping over a pile of rubble, and Izuku finally catches sight of it, rounding a tall office building. It dwarfs the city and buildings below it. The towering green metal shutters in and out as Izuku's second sight is overwhelmed by the sheer size of the thing so close. It catches the side of a skyscraper and the debris tumbles down, threatening fleeing students. Izuku darts into the fray, throwing his hands like he's throwing cards into the sky, managing to turn the rubble into dust with small bursts of concentrated energy. The robot keeps advancing, a slow threat that perches on the horizon like a threat. Izuku feels his anxiety grow, the sparks in his hair growing wild and frizzing. He's turning to flee as well, knowing there's no point in trying to take that thing down, but catches sight of a struggling figure so close to the robot. They look as if they're trapped under rubble, struggling, in need of help. Without a thought, Izuku takes off towards them. He closes the distance in seconds, skin buzzing with the green energy of entropy. His analytical mind makes assessments in hyperspeed, sees the meager distance between the robot and trapped student, sees the heavy pile of rubble and feels the depth of the concrete beneath his feet. Just enough. Izuku springboards off of a totaled car, gathers kinetic energy to him as he falls towards the earth. He lands on his right leg, plants, breaths, and slams his left foot down in the direction of the robot. For a moment there is stillness, nothing, and then the ground cracks and explodes, rushes towards the robot as the energy uses Izuku as a conduit. It claws its way out of him, slams into the robot and tilts it dangerously forward as the ground beneath it falls away. Izuku takes off again, pins and needles erupting from his foot up to his hip, but that's fine. He overdid it a bit, but that robot is big, it's fine, he's fine, and within only a few steps he's planting his foot again, pivots, extends his arms and then brings them together. He stops his spin with his right leg extending towards the robot this time, falls into a crouch, and brings his hands up straight above his head like a pitcher. Izuku has to force the separation of his palms, feels the crackle of energy lick at his skin, as he brings them to point in opposite directions. His right hand points at the robot, a small fist compared to that monstrosity, and his left arm points away. His arms a continuous line, his heart the meeting point. He hopes this works. Desperation is as good a motivator as any. His left hand opens in a grasping motion and energy spills and tumbles and froths down his arm, coming at his heart in a torrent. It overwhelms his pulse for one terrifying moment, before circling once, left, right, ventricle to atrium, and flowing out his right arm, refined and wrangled until it erupts out of Izuku's right hand in an arc of gold and green lightning. He loses sight of it between his hand and the robot, but the energy simmers like heat waves, and Izuku can only watch as it meets the robot's face and explodes. Izuku is blown back, lands on his shoulder and chokes out a cry as his head slams into the cement ground, too fast to cradle it. He rolls a few times before catching himself, digs his hands into rubble to slow himself. Dust and robot bits rain from the sky, smoke obscuring most sight, but Izuku lets his vision switch easily. He catches the other student's electric field, thankfully alive, and makes his way over. His numb left leg has resolved itself in shooting, trembling pain, and limping over the shattered ground is a time-consuming process. By the time he gets to the student, his anxiety is coloring his arms in sparks, despite the steady pulse of the other person. The smoke is waved away and he kneels in front of them, catches sight of glossy, dark feathers and smeared blood. The student trapped has the head of a bird, a raven, crow, and blood stains above and under a squinted eye. The student blinks up at him and coughs once or twice out of their beak, swallows roughly. "I'm guessing that was you?" he asks, voice deep and rough, and Izuku nods nervously. He can see the legs of the student are pinned by rubble, and he's scared that the shadow under them is blood. He circles them and carefully levers the topmost piece off, making quick work of the pile. It's the bottommost piece that did the most damage, twisted metal pipes impaling the calf and thigh of the student's left leg. Izuku does his best to break off the pipes without jostling the other, but they make pained noises behind a clamped beak and Izuku feels thick guilt broil in his stomach. "I'm indebted to you for your rescue," they say, eyes deep and dark and too intense to look into. Izuku busies himself with ripping the bottom of his tank top apart to make bandages. "I'm Tokoyami," they say, and Izuku nods and attempts a smile. He finger spells his name, thinks it'll be useless, but Tokoyami stuns him and signs back "Thank you, Midoriya." Izuku smiles brighter, has to duck his head to hide a blush. The pipes hadn't fully ripped through Tokoyami's leg, hopefully didn't break any bones. Izuku carefully wraps his torn strips around the injuries, his touch light but firm. He has to hope there is medical personnel on site. "Can I carry you?" he signs, and Tokoyami acquiesces with a nod and a blush. Izuku can't tell with the feathers. He doesn't say anything, just flushes again as Tokoyami shifts onto his back with a hiss of pain. Izuku is careful, slips his arms under his knees and arms, tries to stay away from the protruding pipes. Tokoyami is rather light, hollow bird bones. And Izuku has only taken a few steps, smoke slowly clearing, as the intercom comes on and announces the exam has ended. He feels startled, thrown off, as if the past 5 minutes had lasted much longer. All the other exams would be finishing too. Ellie and Kiri left with whatever they had. He has to hope it's enough. Enough for all of them to get in. There you two are. A woman's voice proclaims, and through the thinning smoke he sees the slow and calm swirl of an approaching figure. Izuku takes a step, another, and then he's out of that muffling cloud, right into the view of all the other students that took the same exam, and a tiny woman. Izuku freezes, terrified by all those eyes on him, accidentally tightens his careful hold of Tokoyami. The woman thankfully intervenes. "How sweet of you to carry him to me, dear," the woman says, and Izuku recognizes her as Recovery Girl, Yue's legendary nurse. "Set him down gently, please. I'll take care of that right away." Izuku kneels on the ground and deposits Tokoyami as softly as possible, hyper-aware of every tense and hiss. Recovery Girl hums over him for a few moments before motioning for him to roll onto his stomach. Izuku remains where he is, hopes he can offer some comfort. Recovery Girl reaches down, holds the pipes in tiny hands, and then rips them out of Tokoyami's leg. Izuku flinches back, startled and uncomfortable by the sound and Tokoyami's muffled squawk of pain. She swiftly leans down and kisses Tokoyami's knee, between the injuries, and leans back. "That takes care of your leg. Now let's handle that head injury," she says, as if she hadn't just done the most metal thing Izuku has ever seen in his entire life. She pecks Tokoyami on the temple and, that's it, apparently. Recovery Girl's quirk is legendary, and Tokoyami sits up, looking tired and confused but unharmed. Then the retired hero turns to him, and Izuku fights the urge to back away. "Your leg and head are injured as well, Recovery Girl says, smiling up at him. Izuku swallows roughly and shifts onto the ball of his feet, prepares to throw himself away, but when she moves he's too slow. She gets a wet kiss on his cheek, and almost immediately he feels relief. His head stops pulsing, and his leg feels vaguely tingly now. He blinks in surprise and stares at her. "No need to look so terrified, young man," Recovery Girl says, winks at him, and Izuku can't process that. It feels more like she's saying there is a reason to fear her, and Izuku is smart to do so. He gulps. Recovery Girl takes Tokoyami with her, walks slowly so he can keep up, but the other student had paused and thanked Izuku again. His eyes were too serious again, and Izuku still couldn't meet them. "I won't forget your kindness," Tokoyami signs fluidly. "I am indebted to you. You saved my life. Please don't worry about it," Izuku signs back, flustered and jittery. It didn't come with a price tag. Help never should. At that, Tokoyami leveled a gaze at him that was piercing and unnerving, but also somewhat amused. "Still you have my thanks," Tokoyami tells him, pauses. Then, "I look forward to meeting you again, Midoriya," and leaves Izuku with that confusing and somewhat ominous statement. Is Izuku wrong to be unnerved? Because he's a little unnerved. Just a tad bit. That done, wearing a blood-stained crop top and covered in dust, Izuku turns and just leaves the practical exam. He wants to find Ellie and Kiri, eat a massive bowl of katsudon, shower, and sleep for 3 days. He's tired and buzzing with a weird energy, and tries to ignore the stares of the other students. He hopes what he had managed had been enough. A week passes in painful monotony. After an excited meeting at Izuku's house that evening retelling their practicals, the Sunshine Squad sleeps over at the Midoriya's and they all fall asleep in a big pile on Izuku's bed. They wake up exhausted Sunday morning, eat enough for 9 people, and sleep most of the day. And then it's back to school, and Izuku has to pretend he isn't waiting for the biggest news of his life. It comes the next Saturday morning, while Izuku is feeding his pet Deku, named Small Might, because why wouldn't he be? His mom comes barreling down the hallway, knocks on his door before opening it excitedly. She's holding a white envelope in her hand and Izuku just knows it's from Yue. He empties it on his desk, doesn't even notice his mom leaving. Small Might perches on his shoulder and chitters excitedly as the hologram splutters and begins to play. In the end it was enough. He was enough. He placed first in the practical and in the top 10 for the written exam. All of his efforts, the injuries and pain and tears, it had all been worth it. In the hologram, All Might smiles at him and leans in, almost conspiratorially. You saved young Tokoyami when no one else was willing to do so. He came to the exam proctors and asked that we give you all of his points, as he believed it fair for you saving his life. Izuku feels his heart stutter, leans in too like he could protest, but the pre-recorded All Might just smiles and shakes his head. We didn't do that, of course. The 60 rescue points you were rewarded buoyed you to first place, so Tokoyami was satisfied with that. And then All Might pauses, stills, and when he speaks again Izuku has the sense that this part isn't scripted. I have worked with heroes who would have balked when you acted so bravely, young Midoriya. All Might says, his voice low and serious, confiding. You have a spark in you that the hero world needs. You have a bravery and will that will be inspiring to other heroes. I cannot wait to meet you, my boy. And then the hologram ends, and Izuku drops his face into his hands and cries for a very, very long time. The morning after Yue's acceptance letter arrives, Izuku wakes up to a light feeling in his chest he doesn't recognize. It's a little bit like entropy in that it makes his bones feel light, frothy, and twists his stomach into a pretty little bow. But it's not painful and it's not anxiety, so Izuku just lets it sit there, lets it ruminate in his gut. He goes about his morning routine, texts his friends like normal, but the crisp white envelope on his desk catches his eye too often, reignites the feeling in his chest until it's bubbling in his throat. Is this happiness? The white letter feels like validation and reassurance, a promise that Izuku is right. Despite the hole in his chest the envelope fills, a rancid fear clings to the lining of Izuku's stomach. He knows Bakugo will be unavoidable today, seeking to rub his acceptance into Yue in Izuku's face, and enraged that he didn't place first in the practical exam. Izuku is frightened to face that fury, but for more than simply being the recipient of it, ever since the practical, his quirk has felt like a second skin, a hum that reaches out and responds to everything. It dances beneath his fingertips and races through his veins, more a part of him than it ever has been. He can feel the way it teases his heart into different beats, and he is afraid of what it might do should he come face to face with Bakugo. He's afraid of what he might do, emboldened by Yue and All Might's words. Ellie and Kiri had been suspiciously on edge for the walk to school, as if they could feel the static under Izuku's skin as well. Maybe they suspect Bakugo's ire would be at a boiling point. Kirishima almost refuses to part ways, tail tapping a nervous beat against the sidewalk, only conceding to leave Ellie and Izuku after several minutes of reassurances. Kiri's blatant worry sets Izuku's anxiety off. He doesn't resist the urge to step closer to Ellie, to tangle a hand in the back of his uniform. Ellie smiles at him and gives off an air of calmness, but Izuku can see the clench in his jaw. Everyone is waiting for the ball to drop. The school is buzzing with Bakugo's admittance to Yue, gossip and complaints ringing up and down the tacky halls. Kids a year under Ellie and Izuku pass by, gushing about how Bakugo must have come in first place and how he was the most talented applicant and that he was going to become an amazing hero. Izuku and Ellie share a look and Izuku has to choke back a laugh at the expression on Ellie's face. They part ways for homeroom and Izuku keeps his head down, watches for Bakugo's distinct electric field, but somehow he makes it to lunch without coming face to face with the other boy. Izuku can't help but feel suspicious something awful is building, but nothing happens. No one asks Izuku about Yue or his applications. No one pays him much attention at all, but that's not unusual. Izuku meets Ellie in the corner of the cafeteria they always eat in and huddles next to him with his bento box. His quirk itches and squirms in fits and bursts, feeds into his anxiety until his heart is going fast enough to power the entire school. Ellie is equally tense, accidentally changing his chopsticks into dangerous-looking metal spikes. Neither have to wait long, Bakugo saunters into the cafeteria like he owns it, showing up for the first time that day. Izuku feels his stomach rebel against the few bites of his food he had managed. Bakugo spots him easily enough, dismisses Ellie with a glance, and strides over to their table. It seems like Bakugo is making this public. Izuku carefully closes his bento box and stores it safely in his backpack. Ellie does the same, but stashes the metal spikes in his uniform pocket. Deku, Bakugo says, so much venom packed into that word it almost scalds Izuku. I got into Yui. He has to say it, as if he can't resist seeking the attention. Izuku would be incredibly proud of him. In another life, Bakugo has worked so hard to refine his quirk, strengthen it, learn to fight. But he's ruined so many things for Izuku, beaten other children down, rubbed the death of Izuku's father into his face. Even Izuku's bottomless well of kindness has its limits. I'm not surprised, Izuku signs, and Bakugo sneers at his quick, mismatched fingers. Ellie sighs and translates for Izuku, but he sounds sarcastic and biting when he speaks, and Bakugo bristles. I didn't see you there. Did you chicken out, chicken sheet? Bakugo jeers, throwing himself onto the cafeteria chair and leaning across the table. Izuku sees Ellie grip the spikes in his pocket and rests a hand on his leg briefly. I didn't chicken out, Izuku signs, Ellie translating as he goes. I'm just as determined as you. Bakugo tenses and clenches his fist, face pulling in an ugly glare. Don't compare us, Bakugo hisses. His eyes focus on Izuku with a deadly intensity. I'm not useless like you, I'm not a killer, I'm not a failure. For a moment, Izuku considers letting Ellie lunge out of his seat with his little spikes. He pictures it, watches in slow motion as Ellie turns the table to sand and flings himself forward, imagines Bakugo's surprise as he has to throw himself back. But he grabs Ellie's arm and keeps him in his seat, gives him a stern look. Ellie settles, but his lips pull back like a snarl when Bakugo glances at him. Well, Izuku signs, and feels a sudden rush of cold fury embrace him. This useless failure placed above you on the practical exam, so who's the real loser here? It takes a moment for Bakugo to process the words after Ellie finishes speaking. He freezes, eyes still victorious in his insult, when he finally understands. Izuku watches the table explode under Bakugo's hands. You're lying, he yells, catches the attention of the monitoring teachers. A few make their way over but Izuku turns back to Bakugo impassionately. He offers up a mirthless smile and signs then who placed first, if not you? And the second Ellie says that he's grabbing Izuku and hauling him away from the table as it flips under Bakugo's rage. The teachers barely grab Bakugo in time, restraining him as he spits out vile curses at Ellie and Izuku. The two nonchalantly pack their bags, waving away the teacher's concerns, but Izuku's hands are shaking wildly. He feels the entire cafeteria's eyes on him acutely. The second they make it out, Izuku has to lean against the wall, in deep breaths against the vacuum in his chest. He slowly becomes aware of Ellie holding him tightly, sheltering him from any prying eyes in the hall. He taps Ellie gently on the arm to let him know he's all right now, gives him a wobbly smile at his concerned expression. Ellie smooths his hair down and Izuku shuts his eyes tight against threatening tears. Why does Bakugo get to have such a tight grip on his life? Why does he get to affect so much? After a few more moments of deep breaths, Izuku feels steady enough to move with Ellie towards their next class. It's one they thankfully share. He won't have to worry about Bakugo until the end of the day, if he's lucky. But he's going to worry anyways, isn't he? Ellie texts Kiri about the confrontation and Izuku distracts himself by sketching a bird's head that looks suspiciously like Tokoyami. The final bell rings and Izuku is up and gone, practically sprinting the halls. His anxiety has been building since lunch, fear shuttering his mind every time he hears footsteps or a door slam. His skin is practically crawling off of his body at this point. Reuniting with Ellie helps his anxiety, lets him settle down a bit at the comfortable presence. Ellie has always made him feel safe. They set off together, heading for the underpass where they meet with Kirishima. Ellie shows Izuku the sketches and diagrams he has for his costume so far, more a conglomeration of ideas and needed aspects than a real outfit, but Izuku can almost feel it coming together. The sensation is familiar and reassuring, reminding him of Ellie's weight and Kiri's strong muscles. Ellie is telling Izuku the cool little things he plans to sneak into the costume when Kiri meets up with them a few hundred yards ahead of the underpass. He's as excited as Izuku, pointing out little notes with one of his small claws, so careful with Ellie's work. All it takes is a shift in the wind and Kirishima stiffens, eyes wide and nostrils flaring. He turns and bares his teeth, drops into a crouch in front of Izuku and Ellie. They both freeze, shocked and confused, when Ellie glances up and grabs Izuku's arm in a tight grip. Ahead of them, lounging at the underpass, is Deku. His eyes smolder with a fury that is almost animalistic. A few muted explosions go off and Bakugo pushes off of the cement wall, takes a few steps towards them. Kirishima snarls and his hair rips through his ponytail, frills around his head in spikes. He tears through his backpack straps with a few claws and lets it drop to the ground. "I'm not here for you extras," Bakugo calls, eyes fixed on Izuku. "Leave Deku and If off." Ellie lets his backpack slip off as well, pulls his metal spikes out and kneels on the ground to use the cement to expand them. When he stands again, they're 6 feet long and lethal. Izuku feels slow, frazzled, trying to grasp the situation and struggling. "That's not gonna happen, dumbass," Ellie says, his voice neutral and low. He has a white-knuckled grasp around his weapons. "Don't do this," Izuku signs, suddenly realizing what Ellie and Kiri have been looking for all these years, and now Bakugo strolls up to them, delivering it on a silver platter. A fight. A chance for them to beat the sheet out of Bakugo, revenge for all the bruises and burns and cruel words he's inflicted upon Izuku. "Please just walk away," Izuku urges, but Ellie just levels a sad, determined look at him. "I've been walking away from this bullshit for too long," Ellie says. "I've been excusing this just like everyone else, and it has to stop. I'm not going to let it continue. If Bakugo wants a showdown, I'll give him a FANG showdown." Kiri growls his agreement, thick, short spikes standing up along the length of his tail. He looks like an angry cat and Izuku has to bite back a sob. This feels so ridiculous, so dumb. Bakugo cornering him on his way home? His friends gearing up to fight with their quirks in broad daylight? This has to be a dream, it's so surreal. "Hurry up." Bakugo suddenly roars, his hands lighting up. "Let's go, Deku. Show me you deserve first place." And suddenly he's hurtling towards them, maneuvering sloppily through the air with his hands. It only takes seconds for him to reach them, and Kirishima launches himself forward from his crouch. Bakugo dodges him easily, rotates his body with a micro-adjustment of his hands, but he doesn't think to anticipate that's what was wanted. Ellie plants a leg and swings his metal spike, slamming the blunt end into Bakugo's chest and shoulder. Bakugo goes flying, hits the cement before catching himself. He comes up spitting mad, blood smeared across his face from the cement. Izuku stands behind Ellie and Kirishima, confused and useless, wringing his hands. He doesn't want this, he doesn't want his friends fighting. This is wrong, all wrong. He's the one who's always taken the hits from Bakugo. His friends have never been the ones meant for that. Izuku's anxiety captures his heart in a death grip and squeezes. "Stop hiding!" Bakugo yells, launching himself forward again, and when Kirishima jumps he hits Bakugo this time. They go down in a tangle, and Izuku's never been afraid for Bakugo before now, but the deadly claws Kiri is sporting are fearsome. An explosion to Kirishima's vulnerable throat throws him back, sends him rolling before he gets his feet under him. They're back to their starting positions, Bakugo and the underpass, Kiri low and dangerous in front of Ellie and Izuku, and suddenly he can't take it anymore. Izuku pushes his way around Ellie, dumps his backpack and stands in front of Bakugo with clenched fists. He's not going to sit there and watch. He's not going to let his friends take those hits. Ellie steps forward in an aborted motion, but Izuku throws a hand up, squares his shoulders and glares Bakugo down. His quirk perches under his shoulder blades, foams in his chest and down to his legs. He could fly, his quirk could give him wings, but under the froth is a cold, cold dark. Izuku knows it, is well acquainted with it. It's fury, it's self-hatred, it's where he hides the memories of his father's corpse and final, choked noise, all of his nightmares. It's where he buries all of his barbed thoughts, his evil and twisted dreams of finally shocking Bakugo, of making him see a monster. Embroidery lightning jumps and flows from his fingertips, envelopes him lovingly, promising protection and justice. He could do it, couldn't he? Finally, Bakugo breathes, bending his knees and lighting his quirk. "I thought you were going to hide behind your freakish friends all night dash." And Izuku lets his vision narrow down, lets his second sight shudder over everything, can almost taste Bakugu's pulse. He doesn't give Bakugu time, just leans forward and feels the cement crack under his sneakers, a step from Bakugu before the other boy has finished speaking. He watches Bakugu's eyes widen, sees a stray spark of gold catch on an eyelash, and then breaks Bakugu's jaw with a left hook. Bakugu's blow is glancing, almost too slow, but the pain rips through Izuku's chest and his side. He stumbles back, cradles his burnt rib cage. Bakugu is on his hands and knees, holding his broken jaw and glaring up at Izuku with something too awful for just hatred. Kiri and Ellie are suddenly by his side, Ellie's spikes gone and their backpacks slung over his shoulder. Kirishima is holding his own. Someone called the police. Kiri heard sirens. Ellie says, a gentle tug on the back of Izuku's ruined shirt. We need to get out of here. Izuku doesn't drop eye contact, though, even as his friends pull him away. He stares Bakugu down, lets him see the same fury in his eyes, the coldness. He doesn't recognize the look on Bakugu's face but hopes it's fear, hopes it's the kind of terror that festers deep, rots from the inside out. He wants Bakugu to have to live with the same fear that he's had to live with, day in and day out. And if that makes him a monster, well, he already knew that, didn't he? School comes and goes without incidents. It ends quietly without Bakugu bothering any of them again. He refuses to look at Izuku, doesn't talk to him or taunt him. Izuku isn't sure if it's another way of communicating his contempt or because he really did scare him that day by the underpass, but he can't find the energy to care. The burn takes time to heal, another scar on his patchwork body, but Bakugu's jaw does too, so melons for tat, and all that. Training picks up as soon as school ends. The three of them refine their exercise and diet plans, and receive a letter from UA with more details about their enrollment. It includes their list of classes, code of conduct, and some materials and advice for starting school, and, incredibly, a note at the bottom of the welcome letter about learning JSL. Incoming first years at UE have an immense amount of work on their plate as is, but due to the inclusive nature of this school and the open, supportive environment it encourages, it is advised to learn Japanese Sign Language alongside any summer studies. A student in the first year communicates via JSL, and to facilitate a communicative atmosphere, the faculty and older students will be learning JSL. A list of resources to learn this language is included on the materials page. Izuku can't help the tears that come from reading that. He shows his mom, Kiri and Ellie, even though they have the same letter, cries about it in his room and in public. He's never experienced a school doing anything to help him with his language barrier, and here is UA, literally telling incoming first years to learn sign, and stating that the faculty and older students will be learning it as well. Not even the thought that Bakugu might refuse to learn can puncture the light in his chest. Ellie, Kirishima and Izuku return to Dagoba Beach the day school ends. It's still covered in trash, still an ugly blemish against the sea, but Izuku catches the smell of salt around rust. It reminds him a bit of hope, small and easy to drown out, but always there. The first time Izuku sees Kirishima scale a building, he's mildly terrified. His claws can lengthen enough to dig into the bricks, lethal and black, and his resembles a gecko so much it's dizzying. Izuku is kind of jealous at the gravity-defying stunt, but he could flatten the same building in a few seconds, so he tries to rein it in. But the feat does go into his notebook specifically for Ellie and Kiri's quirk, and he underlines claws, lengthen, spikes too, several times to question Kiri about later. Ellie has been devoting most of his time to designing and building prototypes for their costumes. He has this weird fixation on lightweight, flexible body armor for Izuku that's resistant to energy and electric backlash, because apparently Izuku has a bad habit of overdoing it? That sounds fake, but okay. Kiri's costume is farther along, and it's honestly so sick. Because of how his quirk works, it doesn't cover much. There's black sleeves and shoulder covers with Kevlar padding around joints, and the fabric comes over his collarbones and upper back, but that's it. His chest and back are thickly scaled enough he doesn't need it covered, though Ellie did make his padded pants higher-waisted to protect his organs. The pants are black too, and fitted and have a flexible Kevlar sewn into the knees and shins to loop down over Kiri's soles. The pants are loose enough that he can shift his legs, and there's a built-in hole for his tail. There's a dark red heavy-duty belt with small compartments for whatever is needed. The part that's really cool is his headpiece. Kiri's throat is the most vulnerable part of his body, and after the ugly scar Bakugo left there from the fight, Ellie designed a special Kevlar-like material that's flexible enough for easy motion but thick enough for protection. It attaches to his shirt and also hooks onto the rest of his headpiece. A semi-flexible metal was used in a couple of thin bands, stretching over his nose and around his face, encasing his chin and protecting his temples. It also holds his hair back. Ellie likes a bit of flair, so he designed a mouthguard that hooks onto the front of Kiri's headpiece and covers his mouth. It's a durable metal too, with a terrifying grin of large shark-like teeth. Kirishima loves it, proclaiming something about how manly it is, which is a new thing he picked up recently, but it's adorable and makes him happy, so Izuku and Ellie encourage it. Izuku's costume is mid-development, but coming along nicely. The main fabric is a deep green, close to the same color as Izuku's hair. He'll have black Kevlar pads at his joints, and inlaid body armor over his chest and back. Ellie is working on designing special polyethylene boots with grips and steel toes, which is admittedly giving him some trouble, but he's doing great. Izuku will have a headpiece and some more details, but Ellie says he has to use a special material and everything because of Izuku's electric field. Izuku trusts that the costume will come out well. He trusts Ellie. Outside of Ellie's support items, they're all training. They spar daily and lift weights and run. They clean up Dagoba Beach and use it as an obstacle course, and make sure to take days off to rest and do summer work and prepare academically for UA. The summer both seems to stretch on forever and fly by, and too soon Izuku goes shopping with his mom for school supplies and receives his uniform in the mail. Izuku goes to sleep the night before his first day at UE and dreams of blood-soaked hands and the taste of iron, of soot stains and blackened grips. He sees still bodies and silent pulses and wakes up retching. A monster stares back at him from the mirror and he wonders who he is under the scars and age-old bloodstains. Can something like him become a hero? Izuku's hands are shaking too badly to properly set his tie. He gives up after the third attempt and prays no one will notice. With the way his morning has been going, he'll probably burst into tears. His mom gives him a bento box and practically smothers him throughout breakfast, but it's all a blur. He shorts out the lights in the kitchen and the hallway, and has to do breathing exercises for several minutes to get his quirk under control. His anxiety is crawling right under his skin, too fresh from his nightmares last night and his first day attending UA. Not even encouraging texts from Kirishima and Ellie can help him settle down. Izuku doesn't remember the walk to UA or navigating the halls. He's only present in his body again when Ellie squeezes his shoulder and promises everything will be alright. He blinks furiously and watches him walk towards the support department, shoulders thrown back in his imitation of confidence. Izuku whips his head around to search for Kirishima and finds him standing behind him, a concerned expression on his face. "Everything okay, dude?" He signs and unconsciously wraps his tail around Izuku's ankle. Izuku can only stare at him and try not to vomit. He was supposed to use the walk to UA to prepare, get his quirk under control and calm down and instead his brain decides to shut down? And how he's right outside of homeroom 1 seconds from having to walk in and face all of the other heroes that made it, and what will they think of him, with what he's... "Izuku," Kirishima says, grabbing Izuku's head and shaking it. Izuku is pretty sure he hears something rattle. "Dude, you have to stop overthinking it. I know you're scared and anxious, but I promise I'll be here for you the whole time, and we'll handle things together, okay?" His eyes are intense and serious, but when he rests his forehead against Izuku's it's just a gentle pressure. Izuku drags in a deep breath and nods. His anxiety isn't any quieter, he's not any less afraid, but Kirishima will always be a pillar of strength for him. He offers up a shaky smile and Kiri grins widely back, slinging an arm around his shoulders and turning to face the door to Class 1A. His classmates and his future are just a few steps away. Izuku takes another deep breath and sets his shoulders, and Kirishima shoves the door open. "Asroom conduct, you are bringing shame down upon our entire homeroom." Someone yells, leaning over Bakugo and gesturing choppily. Bakugo just settles deeper into his chair and drags his shoes over the desk with an ugly squeal. Izuku and Kirishima share a look and move quietly along the wall. Everyone's attention seems fixed on Bakugo and the tall boy or their own matters. The only person who notices the pair has a familiar crown of feathers. Midoriya, Tokoyami signs, inclining his head regally. Our paths cross again. Izuku tries to keep from blushing, remembering the many pages of notes and homework that are covered in doodles of Tokoyami. You were right back at the exam. Izuku signs, ducking his head a little. How's your leg? It's healed admirably, apart from some scarring and stiffness. Tokoyami admits. I am forever indebted to you. Without your aid, my fate would have been shrouded in far worse. Izuku doesn't know how he's supposed to answer that, apart from blushing and shaking his head furiously and bringing his hands up to do the same, but then Kiri steps in with his lovely smile, saving Izuku from public embarrassment yet again. I'm Kirishima, he says, and Tokoyami inclines his head towards him as well. Where'd you learn sign? Kirishima asks, and for the first time Tokoyami looks mildly flustered. Well, it has to do with my quirk. Tokoyami says, shuffling slightly in his seat. You see Deku comes a snarl from behind, and Kirishima whirls and shoves Izuku behind him in one movement. His hair explodes out of its ponytail and frills around his head in spikes, and Kirishima bares his teeth at Bakugo. Izuku is already fumbling at Kiri's sleeve, trying to avoid his iron grasp and get around him. The rest of the class, whose numbers had almost doubled since Izuku and Kirishima arrived, freezes at the sudden tension in the room. Looks go from Bakugo's tense form to Kirishima's bared fangs, and the boy from earlier cuts between them. This is a classroom, he begins to bluster, jerking his arms about, when the appearance of a man in black at the front of the room catches Izuku's eye. His expression is blank, but there's a look in his eyes that, sit down, he says quietly, and a shudder goes down Izuku's spine at the tone. He hunkers behind Kirishima as the other classmates disperse, Kirishima waiting for Bakugo to turn and cross the room. They take the seats next to Tokoyami, Kirishima between Izuku and the rest of the class. The man surveys the students with a heavy gaze in silence. You are Yui's class 1A. You are in the hero department. The man speaks, and to Izuku's shock, signs along. You may be teenagers, but you will not bring your petty squabbles into my classroom. If you have a problem, speak to me about it or settle it outside of classes. I don't have time for this, and neither will you. He stops for a moment and meets the eyes of every student, except Izuku, because he drops his head and tries to sek in an even breath amid the fear weighing down his lungs. Kirishima throws him a concerned look. I am Aizawa, also known as the underground hero Eraserhead. I will have a significant role in your education this year. Again, Aizawa pauses, but seems not to find what he was hoping to in the students. He sighs and picks up a clipboard and pile of papers off of his desk. There are practice uniforms in the boxes at the front of the room. He says, stepping around the aforementioned boxes. They are sized the same way as your school uniforms, with some exceptions, and are labeled with your name. Change out and meet me back here. Nobody moves, unsure of what exactly is going on, but then Bakugo gets up and saunters over to the box, rifles through until he finds his package, and throws a sneer at the other students. He stalks out of the room, and the bang of his foot connecting against the door startles everyone into action. Izuku follows the rest of the boys down to the bathroom. He sticks close to Kirishima and cradles his practice uniform like it's priceless. The others are chattering in excitement, wondering what these uniforms are for and what Aizawa is going to have them do, but Izuku chews his lip until it bleeds to get his anxiety under control, because practice uniforms means practicing, and they're here to be heroes, and the only thing they could practice is using their quirks. A stall door slams open inches from Izuku's face and he leaps back with an eep, practice clothes tucked close to his chest protectively. His wide eyes meet Bakugo's and he shrinks away. Bakugo looks at him blankly, brow wrinkling, before tossing his head and shoving his way out of the crowded bathroom. Several boys glance at Izuku and Bakugo curiously, and Kirishima rests a hand on Izuku's shoulder blade from behind him. Izuku slips into an empty stall and locks it with trembling fingers. He needs to calm down and get his quirk under control. If there really is an examination, he has to be ready for it. He can't let his quirk get out of hand. Izuku needs to prove that he belongs here. After changing out, he takes several deep breaths and steps out of the stall. Kirishima is waiting for him, chatting with a dark-haired boy with a brilliant smile. "Hi, Midoriya," the boy says, extending a fine-boned hand. "I'm Shiro Hanta." Izuku reaches out and clasps his hand gently, almost startled by the feeling of thick calluses and scarred flesh under his palm. Izuku shakily signs it's nice to meet you before tangling his fingers together. Shiro's eyes avidly track his hands and offers another wide smile. "It's nice to meet you too," he says, and Kirishima nudges Izuku's shoulder with a grin. Izuku feels his blush intensify. They move back towards the classroom, Shiro and Kirishima chatting. Shiro continually glances down at Izuku to smile or say something to him, but for once the inclusion doesn't feel forced. Maybe it's because of Shiro's laid-back, easy smile. Back in the classroom, the subdued mood from earlier has lifted. Students arrange their school uniforms on their desks and laugh easily, only a few catching Aizawa's watchful, assessing gaze. Izuku can feel when he catches Aizawa's eye and glances up against reason. He feels frozen for a moment, looking into those dark eyes, and has to rip himself away. He doesn't know what it is about Aizawa that makes him so unsettling, the quiet power? His heavy, knowing eyes? But there's something there. Instead of going to the welcome assembly, I've decided to make a better use of our time. Aizawa says once everyone has settled down. Whispers break out, but are swiftly quelled by a glare from Aizawa. "I've set up a number of exams so I can evaluate your quirks myself. Follow me." He moves towards the door, and there's hesitation again. Confused glances are traded, feet shuffled, but the class gets over it much swifter than before. They move after Aizawa, and Izuku grasps the back of Kirishima's uniform in comfort. His anxiety eats him alive from the inside out. They gather in an enclosed field a short distance from the Hero Department buildings. Izuku naturally gravitates towards the edge of the crowd of students, and has the chance to view the area unencumbered. There's a massive obstacle course with a wall at the beginning that's, based on Izuku's guess, around 120 yards tall, a huge sand pit, and a strange-looking jungle gym. He's not the only one to catch sight of it. Several students point at the giant wall in trepidation. They're beginning to understand. "You will undergo a number of trials I have designed. I will be evaluating your quirks, as well as your individual and unique abilities." Aizawa tucks a hand in his pocket and shifts his stance as he glances up at everyone. Izuku feels a bead of sweat slip down his neck. His pulse is hammering. "The first trial," Aizawa says, turning so he angles towards the massive wall, "is to get over the wall. I will split you into 5 teams of 4. Everyone must get over the wall, and everyone must aid in the effort." He pauses and lifts his eyes above his clipboard to gauge the understanding of his students. He drops his eyes back down to his papers and begins reading off the teams. Izuku strains to hear his. "And with Midoriya will be Shiro, Uraraka, and Azui." Izuku's stomach bottoms out at not being in a group with Kiri and exchanges a shaky look with him. Kirishima squeezes his arm and smiles widely, and then signs I'll only be a few yards away the whole time. Izuku nods and tangles his hands in the front of his practice uniform as Kirishima moves away to join his group. "I'm pretty lucky," Shiro says, coming to stand next to Izuku. He rubs the back of his head and leans gently into Izuku's shoulder. "Kirishima told me you're wicked smart." Izuku flushes a deep red and shakes his head, but Shiro just smiles softly at him. "Are you doing okay?" Shiro signs slowly, the tip of his tongue poking out in concentration. For a moment Izuku can only stare at him, stare at his long fingers, slow but purposeful in their inexperienced motions, and tries to fight back the urge to start crying. "I will be," Izuku signs back, and Shiro brightens up. He gently knocks his elbow into Izuku's shoulder, and Izuku scoots a little closer to him. The other 2 members of their group arrive moments later. They're both girls, one has silky green hair and big eyes, and the other is practically vibrating in excitement. "I'm Uraraka," she says and pumps her fist in the air. "I'm ready to win this thing." Shiro and Izuku share an impressed look. "I'm Azui, Karo," the other girl says, and Izuku finds her gaze too piercing to hold eye contact for long. Shiro introduces himself, and Izuku slowly signs his name, anxiety and shame both alight in his gut. But Uraraka and Azui only smile and greet him, and he feels himself relaxing. There's a moment of awkward silence. So, my quirk is just, tape? Shiro says, rubbing his knuckles along the side of his head. I can shoot a couple different kinds of tape out of my elbows. He wiggles the joints and Izuku finds himself distracted by the modifications to Shiro's arms. His uniform sleeves are cut off at the shoulders and leave his muscular arms bare. Izuku flushes and scratches at his chin, averting his gaze only to meet Azui's attentive eyes. I control the gravity of objects I touch, Uraraka says, smiling encouragingly when Izuku glances up at her. He rubs his fingers together and tilts his head a little, blush lighting his cheeks up. I can harness energy from my electric field, Izuku signs, and feels his stomach drop at the looks of confusion from the other three. He furiously blinks back the sting of threatening tears. Can you fingerspell dash? Azui signs an approximation of electric field, and Izuku nods shakily. He fingerspells it and feels unprecedented relief when the others nod in understanding. Uraraka lets out a coo of, "That's so cool," and Izuku pulls his chin back into the collar of his uniform in embarrassment. I can do virtually everything a frog can, Karo, Azui says, and the group glances at each other before looking up at the wall in silence. It is a very, very tall wall, seemingly made of wood, the boards fitting together seamlessly. Izuku watches it phase out of view as his second sight crawls forward, and then the electric field blurs as his eyes lose focus. They have strong, versatile tape, anti-gravity, the traits of a frog, and increased energy and power. How are they going to get over this thing? I have an idea, Izuku signs, and his group circles around him. Ready when you are, Midoriya? Shiro calls. He double-checks the double-sided tape around his palms, as well as the wide swathes of tape tied around his waist and chest. Pieces loop down around his thighs in an imitation of a climbing artist. A few dozen yards away, Izuku throws a thumbs up and digs his foot into a shallow hole. He braces the bottom of it against the side with his back to the wall. He adjusts his grip on the long piece of tape tied to Shiro's chest. His breaths come hard and fast already. He's anxious and afraid his plan is going to fail or he's going to throw Shiro too hard or someone will fall or... Midoriya, Azui croaks, startling Izuku out of his panic. This is a good plan, and everything is going to be okay, Karo. Calm down. He tries to take a few deep breaths and nods shakily, but his inner monologue doesn't stop for a moment. Behind Shiro, Uraraka waits for the second thumbs up before gently tapping Shiro's shoulder and hurrying out of the way. Izuku doesn't give himself time to panic, this time. He knows the other groups have stopped to watch them and he knows this could go horribly wrong. But Shiro is crouching with a determined smile on his face, hands loose and body relaxed, and Uraraka is cheering him on, and Azui is calm by his side. He can do this. He can do this. Izuku takes a deep breath and tenses his core, feels entropy bubble through his veins. Energy froths just under his skin and Izuku presses down on his plant foot and spins, wrenches his arms through to fling Shiro through the air. His wrist joint protests for a single moment that Izuku doesn't have time for. He only has eyes for Shiro, for the streamlined figure of his classmate bulleting through the air. He arcs up and towards the wall and then, naturally, as if Izuku hadn't just bodily flung him, brings an elbow up in a short motion and catches himself on the wall with a short string of tape. Shiro slams into the wall forcefully but hangs on and throws a thumbs up down to his group below. Izuku lets out a massive breath of air and falls to his knees, pressing his hands to his eyes. Hot tears fall down his forearms, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that Shiro isn't hurt. The plan is working so far. He didn't hurt him with his quirk, and Uraraka is cheering loudly just behind him. Did you hurt yourself, Midoriya? Azui asks, crouching beside him, and Izuku shakes his head. His smile is smeared with tears, but it's wide and bright. Are you ready for your turn? He signs, and Azui smiles and rests her finger against her chin. I think so, she says, and her tongue pokes out playfully. Azui is tied in the same long strand of tape as Siro and tapped by Uraraka. Izuku can throw her more gently, since Siro will catch her with his tape, and he does, pulling her up to the wall so she can stick against it. After he had been thrown, Siro had added double-sided tape to his shoes so he'd be able to climb better, and uses his legs and an arm to hold himself against the wall. Izuku and Uraraka are the last to get up the wall. The group had come up with a few different ideas, since the order of ascension was difficult to determine, but the best one they could come up with was Uraraka sitting on Izuku's back while he jumped as high as he could. Azui and Siro's combined strength would hopefully be able to pull up their combined weights. Izuku kneels on the ground so Uraraka can climb on his back, his blush deepening as her weight rests against him. He loops the tape around them both, tying it under his legs and then back around Uraraka's waist. She gives it a few tugs and then pats his shoulder. "They're ready when you are," she says, her small hands settling on Izuku's shoulders. Izuku takes a deep breath and carefully hooks one hand under one of Uraraka's knee. He'll need the other for balance when he jumps. Izuku wedges his feet under him and straightens his limbs just enough to let the blood run freely through them. He takes a deep breath and feels the rush of his quirk down to his feet, feels the exact moment when the energy crashes into the ground. His muscles tense and then he launches himself upwards, the ground fracturing under him, his breath stolen by the whipping air. Izuku clutches Uraraka tighter on reflex and moves his other arm out into the space ahead of him. Nearing the apex of his jump, he feels Siro's tape wrap around his forearm, and seconds later something warm and wet grasps his wrist. He's hauled forward by the two before they start falling and he braces to hit the wall. The impact isn't too hard, but Uraraka lets out a little shriek and clutches tighter to his shoulders at the jostling. Before they slip, Izuku brings a foot back and slams it into the wall. His steel-toed shoes protect his toes, and his quirk gives him the extra kick he needs to form a small crater for a foothold. He does the same with the other leg and grabs a hold of the piece of tape Siro lowers down to him. "Everything go okay?" Siro asks, crawling down the wall casually, as if they're not almost 100 yards in the air. Izuku nods breathlessly, despite a worrying pain in his left leg, and Uraraka laughs shakily and agrees. Azui crawls down alongside them and helps outfit Izuku's hands in the same double-sided tape as Siro. They're all tied together with a new, shorter piece of tape, and Izuku moves to take the lead. Since he's the most likely to fall, he'll go first with Uraraka, allowing Azui and Siro the best chance to catch them before they fall far. Climbing is slow going. Despite Uraraka's quirk, Izuku's muscles are trembling and he's drenched in sweat. His lower legs begin to feel the effort of kicking into the wall, and his fingers and wrists ache from clinging to the surface so desperately. But Uraraka constantly encourages him, and Azui and Siro occasionally chirp up with support as well, and before he knows it they've covered the 30 or so yards to the top. Izuku flops over the edge and lays on his side for a few moments, trying to catch his breath and letting his muscles painfully relax. Azui and then Siro swiftly join him and Uraraka, and they all gather around to rest before attempting to get down the wall. Izuku huffs in short breaths and smiles up at Siro's worried look. "Let's get this over with," he signs slowly, tape impeding his fingers, and the rest of his group nod determinedly. "Let's do this." Uraraka cheers, pumping her fist again despite laying on her side behind Izuku. Siro helps Izuku get onto his feet and they make their way slowly to the other edge of the wall. The distance between the sides is barely a dozen yards, and the students cluster a short way from the edge. They had already gone over this once before, but they go over it again. Izuku slowly levers himself over the edge of the wall and kicks his legs to create his first footholds. He's going down with his head upwards, so he'll be able to use the footholds as handholds as well. Siro and Azui descend alongside him, tape stretching over the empty space in a parallel line. Knowing no one is below him and Uraraka sends his heart racing, but seeing his friends out of the corner of his eyes reassures Izuku as well. Azui and Siro both climb facing downwards and keep with the easy pace Izuku sets. They've made it just less than halfway down when Izuku slips. His fingers cramp and spasm, and he slips from the wall with an aborted yelp. His other hand slaps the wall desperately, but he only succeeds in tearing his fingers up against the splintered wood. For a moment Uraraka and Izuku are weightless, tumbling through the air, Uraraka's arms tight around his shoulders, and then Ajui's tongue is tight around Izuku's arm, and Shiro is suddenly just below them, bracing his feet against the wall and letting them rest against his hips and stomach. "Didn't know our pace wasn't fast enough for you, Midoriya," Shiro says, breathless but with a smile. Izuku chokes out a strangled noise and presses his face against his chest, Uraraka letting out a gasping laugh. For a moment they all hold still, trying to rein their hearts into a reasonable tempo and give Ajui time to climb down to them. They only move again when Izuku notices Shiro's straining grip on the piece of tape that's keeping him horizontal for them. His arms are trembling, and his muscles bulge with the strain of holding all of their weight. They set off again, but with Ajui and Shiro closer to Izuku. He takes strength from their presence and forces his body into an even rhythm. He loses track of time again, and doesn't realize he's zoned out until Uraraka shakes him gently. "Midoriya? Are you okay?" she asks, and he nods as well as he can, throwing a glance over his shoulder. They're close to the ground, maybe only 20 yards, and Shiro and Ajui make their way over to them. "We're close enough that we can rappel down," Shiro says, pulling a new strip of tape out and using it to tape himself to the wall. He shoots out a longer, thicker piece, and ties it to Izuku and Uraraka as he explains. "I'll have a running strand so I'll control the speed of you guys. Don't worry, all you have to do is bunny hop down the wall, okay?" Izuku and Uraraka both nod, emboldened by the promise of sturdy ground so close, and take the first jump when Shiro gives them the okay. They fall faster than Izuku had anticipated, and he scrabbles against the wall to brace himself when they come back down. He cranes his head back and catches sight of Shiro braced against the wall, entire body shaking with the effort of holding them in the air. Ajui flashes a thumbs up and Izuku hops again, and then again and again, until his feet hit the ground and he topples sideways from the unexpected force. Uraraka lets out a relieved hiccup and Izuku nods in agreement, pressing his face against the ground. The short grass tickles his face and the feeling of their electric fields against his is the best thing he's ever felt. A few stray tears of relief squeeze out of his eyes, and Izuku can't even bother to wipe them away. A few feet to their side, Shiro drops onto the ground and Ajui gracefully unwraps herself from his back. Shiro catches sight of them first. He barks out a short laugh and walks over to them while rubbing his elbows. "Taking a nap without us?" he asks, Ajui taking a seat next to them. Izuku wags his hand in a vague gesture at him and catches sight of the fond smile on his face. He presses his face into the grass to hide his blush. Shiro kneels next to them and sets to cutting the tape away. It's the least sticky kind he can make, and it peels off of their clothes easily enough. Once free, Uraraka tumbles onto the ground and lays there, spread-eagled, her hair a sweaty tangle. With a tap of her fingers she lifts her quirk off of the four of them, and Izuku immediately feels how his body becomes heavier and sinks into the ground more. In just a few moments, Shiro's used tape sits in a pile and the four of them splay out a short ways from the base of the wall. Izuku can just make out a few groups making their way over the top of the wall, but he's distracted by Aizawa walking over to them. They all scrabble into sitting positions. "You're one of the fastest groups to ever finish that obstacle," he says, evenly assessing them all. His eyes catch on the pile of Shiro's tape, and then he turns and walks back towards the wall. Izuku and the others trade looks of confusion. "Was that a compliment?" Uraraka asks, brushing her sweaty bangs off of her face. "As close to one as we'll ever get with him, Karo," Ajui says, and Izuku has to agree with her. Aizawa doesn't seem the one to just hand out compliments. It takes a little while, but eventually everyone makes their way over the wall. Aizawa gives them a chance to rest as he scratches down notes on his clipboard, and the students are eager to take the chance to spread out in the shade. Kirishima makes his way over to Izuku as soon as his group finishes. "You good, dude?" he signs, dropping down next to Izuku. His claws are bloody around the beds, and his hair mussed wildly. Izuku runs his fingers over it until he feels how sweaty it is, and makes a face. "I'm tired and might have overdone it a bit, but I feel good." Izuku signs, smiling sheepishly when Kiri narrows his eyes. But the other boy just grins and pokes his side. "I'm glad you're feeling good," he says, and then his eyes go wide. You were so cool when you threw Ciro like that, he exclaims, and Ciro twists his head to look blearily at the mention of his name. He smiles at Kirishima's exuberant wave. Izuku tangles his fingers together and then extricates a hand to scratch the back of his neck. It was a team effort, really, he signs. I couldn't have done it without the others. Come on, Midoriya. Uraraka suddenly says, punching Izuku gently in the back. You came up with the plan. It was so smart. Izuku flushes a deep red and Kiri leans over to poke his cheek. How many times did that happen? He teases, and Izuku covers his flaming face with his hands. Several, Karo, Azui says, and Ciro laughs at Izuku's mortified expression when he whips around to look at her. Kirishima chuckles and catches Izuku's neck in a gentle hold. Instead of fighting, Izuku slumps back into Kiri's chest, definitely not pouting from behind Kirishima's bicep. Uraraka politely stifles a laugh behind her hand. We're moving on to the next trial, Aizawa says, tucking his clipboard under his arm. Izuku is tired, sweaty, and injured in at least 3 different places, but he can't articulate the booing feeling in his chest when Kirishima ruffles his hair and his group members stand alongside him. Uraraka's clear determination in her eyes, Azui's collected interest, and Ciro's unwavering perseverance are a balm against Izuku's trepidation for the coming trials. He knows they'll be able to tackle anything together. How was school, sweetheart? His mom calls. Izuku makes a vague whining noise and stumbles into the kitchen. He collapses into a chair and desperately inhales the delicious smell of dinner cooking. He has to forcefully swallow back his saliva. That bad, who? She gasps, dropping the long spoon in her hand and rushing over to Izuku. She gently clasps his dirt-covered face her hands and smooths his wild hair back. What happened? She asks, already gathering herself up to go give you a stern talking to. Izuku can see the building storm and shakes his head, catches his mom's hands in his own with a smile. It was amazing, he signs, smile 1000 watts and glowing. Izuku immediately launches into regaling his mother with his first day, and dinner sits forgotten as Inko immerses herself in her baby boy's joy and enthusiasm. Despite being dirty and bruised and tired, he hardly stops to rest. Inko hasn't seen this energy in years, and has to stifle her tears. Izuku chokes down his dinner and then drags himself to shower. He barely makes it to his bed, sleep dragging at him with a chokehold, and takes his medication before collapsing onto his All Might sheets. Izuku fishes a scrap of paper out of his uniform pocket and squints at the scribbled numbers before entering them into his charging phone and smiling down at his new contacts. Despite his exhaustion and aches, Izuku is giddy with happiness. He falls asleep in minutes, and he sleeps through the entire night without any nightmares. What the hell's going on? Ellie mutters, bringing Izuku and Kirishima up short. They glance up from their phones at his voice and stare in shock at the gates to UA. A massive crowd of reporters and news vans crowd the entrance, peering anxiously across the lawns and pestering students and staff making their way onto the grounds. Is this legal? Kiri asks, tucking his phone away. Ellie pushes Izuku and him away from the crowd without looking away, eyes sharp and suspicious. He knows what crowds like this mean. Someone's dropped something juicy. Let's get out of here before they notice us, he says, and Izuku doesn't argue, despite his curiosity. Something is going on, he'll figure it out in his own ways. They take a longer route around to slip in a side entrance by the kitchens. It's so small and nondescript that they make it through unharassed, and as soon as they flash their student IDs, Izuku tugs his phone back out and starts perusing. The first result he gets after a specific UA search gives him enough of a shock he stops walking. Kirishima and Ellie continue past for a few steps before realizing he's stopped. Upon their queries, he holds up a trembling hand and shows him the news feed on his phone. All Might teaching position incites wave of threats against Yui. Retiring symbol of peace takes on new battlefield. You under fire for accepting All Might. Numerous villain organizations threaten action against you. And that's only the top of the first page, Izuku signs, trading a wide-eyed look with Kirishima and Ellie. Without speaking, they turn and run for the hero department, parting from Ellie just outside the doors. He yells something back to them about keeping their heads down, and then Kirishima and Izuku burst into the silent halls of the school. Their shoes squeal in fury as they cut corners too fast, and Kirishima has to catch Izuku around the arm with his tail to keep him from falling more than once. They slam the doors of 1A open and tumble into the classroom breathless and sweaty. There are very few students already inside. Izuku sees Uraraka, as well as the tall boy berating Bakugo from the other day and the blonde boy with a tail, but that's it. The students present startle at the commotion but relax perceptibly once they see their classmates. Midoriya! Uraraka exclaims, hurrying over to them. Are you alright? Were you chased here by something? Izuku shakes his head wildly and points to his phone, signing newsfeed with the hand not braced on his knee. Yes, we were all just discussing this revelation, the stern boy says, adjusting his glasses. He's frowning at Izuku and Kirishima, slumped over themselves in the doorway. Did you two run here? Not important, Kirishima gasps, bracing himself against the wall. Where's Aizawa-sensei? He looks affronted at the dismissal of their rule-breaking. The rest of the class exchange confused looks and shake their heads. No one has seen their homeroom teacher yet. Kirishima and Izuku drag themselves over to their seats and drop into them, and the other students present follow them over. Do you think this is going to be a big thing? Uraraka asks, fiddling with her bracelets, and Izuku taps his phone against his chin before shrugging and dropping it. Honestly, this is really big, All Might teaching? Villains threatening the school? How are they going to keep everyone safe? Izuku signs, too lost in thought to notice how fast his hands are moving. Is this a temporary position? Who will replace him as the symbol of peace? How does this? Izuku, buddy, you need to slow down, Kirishima says, dropping his scaled hand onto Izuku's. He glances up, confused, and winces when he sees the bewildered expressions on his classmates' faces. He rubs the back of his head and sinks lower in his chair in embarrassment, signing sorry. No need to apologize, Midoriya, the stern boy says. He adjusts his glasses again and makes a short gesture. You are masterful in your command of language, and we all must endeavor to reach your level of prowess. Izuku blinks at him in shock and glances at the others, who are all nodding, including Kirishima. Ida is right, Uraraka says, hopping onto the desk next to Izuku. We just need to work harder. Izuku finally has a name for Bakugo's tormentor from yesterday, and offers him a shaky and shy smile. Kirishima nudges Izuku gently in the shoulder with his tail and proffers up a knowing smile. Will All Might be teaching us? The last boy asks, a tail of his own curling over his lap. Izuku and the rest of them stare at him, suddenly awash in the realization. Since they're in the hero department and All Might is a hero. Yes, he will be, Aizawa says from the doorway, and everyone whips around to stare at him, Kirishima nearly tumbling off of his perch on top of his desk. A number of students follow him in, some looking a little worse for wear. Among the latter is Shiro and Bakugo. Izuku balks to see the scuff marks on Shiro's uniform and skewed tie, but he waves off their concern as he makes his way over to them. Don't worry, I was just restraining Mr. Trigger Happy over there, Shiro explains, pointing his thumb over his shoulder at Bakugo. He growls wordlessly at them. Got a little riled up from all the reporters. Shiro reaches behind Ida to fist bump the boy with the tail and smiles widely at Kirishima, Izuku, and Uraraka. Izuku is abashed to find his smile just as lovely as yesterday. I'm Shiro Hanta, nice to meet you, he says to Ida, offering a hand. Ida takes it and nods to him. Ida Tenya, the pleasure is mine, Ida says, and Uraraka glances at Izuku with raised eyebrows. They're both so polite. I'll explain the situation as soon as the rest of the students arrive, Aizawa says, settling behind his desk and pulling out a sleeping bag and juice packet. Izuku and Uraraka glance at each other again. Don't get too rowdy. The other students gather around Izuku and Kirishima's desks. They keep their voices low to avoid angering Aizawa, but the conversation doesn't die off. It grows with the addition of new students. Shiro perches himself on Izuku's desk and smiles down at him, signs out your hair looks nice today. And Izuku flushes a bright red. He covers his hot face with his hands and wiggles awkwardly. Thank you, he signs back, and Siro's grin spreads. He reaches forward with careful hands and smooths some of the longer strands behind Izuku's ears, and he's pretty sure steam is coming out of his ears. He hunches his shoulders up around his ears as Siro props his cheerfully grinning face on his fist. Midoriya, Kirishima. Comes a deep voice, and Izuku whirls around to see Tokoyami's glossy feathers. It's nice to see you again. Izuku signs. Tokoyami nods to him and then turns to introduce himself to their other classmates. He settles gracefully into his desk chair. Izuku can feel his face flushing, feel it heat the sensitive skin around his scars and run down his throat. It's just that Siro and Tokoyami are both very, very pretty. They're both sleek and slim, glossy dark hair, or feathers, and kind, sweet eyes. In fact, Izuku is starting to notice that there is a disproportionate number of very pretty boys in their class. Siro and Tokoyami, yes, but also Kirishima, and the blonde boy with the tail, and the boy with the two-toned hair. Ida is less pretty and more very, very handsome, with his strong jawline and thickly muscled arms, and the lights above Izuku's desk short out with a pop of multicolored lights and fizzle. Kirishima notices because he always notices, and gives Izuku a concerned look as their classmates completely miss the drama happening over their heads. Izuku sketches out a quick overwhelmed with his hand below the desk, and Kirishima's eyes soften in understanding. He's just turning to the people clustered around their desks when Aizawa suddenly snaps for everyone to sit down. There's a clatter as people throw themselves into their desks and hunker away from Aizawa's short tone. Once everyone seems settled, Aizawa pulls himself into a seated position and leans against the front of his desk. You've all seen it on the news or heard it from your classmates. Yes, All Might is taking up a position as a teacher here. Yes, he will be teaching you as members of the hero class. Yes, his first class with you is today, after lunch. No, you cannot talk to me about him in any way. That's all. A stunned silence falls for a few seconds before utter chaos breaks out, but by then, the bell for first PRD is ringing, and Aizawa makes his smooth getaway. Izuku finds himself short of breath with excitement and dread alike. Their morning classes and lunch pass like the wind, for Izuku, at least. Every time he glances at the clock, he finds him closer and closer to his first class with his idol, and he's not any more prepared for it than he was this morning. He has to duck into the bathroom twice to try and breath through impending anxiety attacks. But their afternoon class arrive anyway, and with them All Might. I am here. All Might bellows, and the entire classroom goes dark in a burst of electricity. Izuku slams his head down on his desk and tries to blink back the tears he can feel budding. Of all times, now is when he loses complete control. That was unexpected, but have no fear. Our lesson takes place in another kind of classroom. All Might says and gestures with grandiose to the wall. Nothing happens. Just a moment. All Might says a little sheepishly, and then rips open part of the wall with his bare hands. You cannot be a hero without your hero costumes. He shouts, pulling stylized briefcases out of strange compartments in the wall. He stacks them at the front of the room and then helps pass them out, and Izuku opens his case to see a folded note on top of his costume. Izuku, I got invited onto this project. Isn't that crazy? I was so psyched. So one of our projects was to help with the design of your hero costumes. A third year asked for my help with the hero costumes for your class. Basically, I bullied my way into the part of the support department that designs the first year costumes and made them let me do yours and Kiri's. But here it is. There's a few changes I made to the design from this summer just 'cause they have some seriously cool tech here. I hope it performs well. Let me know if you need any adjustments or help with it. P.S. You're going to do so well. I know it. You just need to believe in yourself. Me and EI have your back no matter what. Kick some butt, kiddo. You can do it. Ellie did change the design, Izuku realizes. The overall color scheme is a pale gold and dark green. There's a pale gold shirt with cut-off sleeves and dark green lines cutting across it. When Izuku rubs his fingers across it, he can feel the reinforced, flexible Kevlar. The pants are a dark green with thickly padded black knees. There's a black utility belt with the pants. He has thick, pale gold fingerless gloves with grips on the palm, and long, thick elbow pads in the green of his pants. The boots that gave Ellie so much trouble. Designing sit at the bottom of the case, shiny and black with lethal steel toes. And then, at the very back of the case, Izuku carefully unwraps something small and padded. As the wrapping falls away, he feels his breath catch. A beautiful set of goggles and a face mask sit in his hands. The goggles are a gray so deep it's almost black, and the face mask is startling and off-putting all at once. It's similar to Kirishima's face mask in that it has teeth on it, but it's an unnerving smile, wide, bright white fangs in a dark gray background. The goggles and face mask fit together seamlessly. Izuku smooths his scarred fingers over the cool surface even as his vision blurs with tears. It's perfect, Ellie. It's more than perfect. A battle scenario. On their first day. Izuku knows All Might isn't the #1 hero for nothing. He trusts that he must know what he's doing, so he just goes with it, and thanks his lucky stars that Tokoyami gets assigned as his partner. It's such a relief to have a partner fluent in sign that the idea of facing Bakugo doesn't freeze him up in terror like it should. Instead, his mind starts running through different ideas for the best way to mesh his and Tokoyami's quirk, which he only has a very shallow understanding of, thanks to the assessments Aizawa put them through the day before. Tucked out of view of the villain's building, Izuku and Tokoyami sign swiftly back and forth until they have a plan in place. It's a little rushed by Izuku's standards, but, looking into Tokoyami's dark eyes and seeing Dark Shadow peek from under his cloak gives him a confidence he'd never have on his own. They enter the building and Dark Shadow immediately slithers his way across the floor and up the wall. He sets his little claws into the paneling on the ceiling and peels at it until it falls free, and carefully sets it on the ground to hide their presence. Dark Shadow then scoops Izuku up and lifts him up until he can reach the wiring. All it takes is the press of his palm and a will, and all the lights in the building go out. Izuku feels the ripple through Dark Shadow at the increase in the dark. He's set gently back on the ground and he smooths his hand over his face in thanks, smiling widely at the little chirp and wiggle he gets. When he glances up at Tokoyami, he's almost sure he sees a blush, but it's hard to tell in the dark. Izuku lets his eyes drift out of focus and slip into his second sight. Tokoyami's field is a smooth whirl of dark gold and midnight blue sand-like particles. Dark Shadow is a curious absence of anything, a big blank space in the midst of a colorful, half-blinding world. It's so entrancing Izuku just lets himself stare for a few moments before Tokoyami gestures for him to move along. Izuku feels Bakugo's explosions before he hears them. They shudder through his vision like little waves, and Izuku signs to Dark Shadow, who communicates it to Tokoyami. They keep a circuitous route to avoid Bakugo, and Tokoyami sends Dark Shadow out as a feeler to try and locate the bomb in Ida. If Izuku was alone, he'd be near paralyzed with fear. Bakugo still strikes terror in him, despite the few times he's managed to stand up for himself, and the more he uses his powers, the more he wants to use them. It's become easier and easier to let his power leak out into everything around him. But with Tokoyami's low hum of an aura brushing against his and Dark Shadow's sweetly comforting presence, Izuku finds it easier to push back the terror and uncertainty. Dark Shadow zips back to them and motions wildly in one direction, signing loud, sparky bright coming. Tokoyami and Izuku arc into a sprint in the opposite direction Dark Shadow had come from. On a whim, Izuku reaches out to clasp Tokoyami's hand in his. They climb 3 floors before Dark Shadow motions for them to slow down. They're a lot closer to the bomb, a floor below and near the adjacent corner, and Izuku feels his stomach give an anxious roll as he considers the next part of the plan. The lights are out and Bakugo is separated from Ida, his teammate. He gives a wide-eyed look to Tokoyami and can just make out the other boy's stalwart gaze. "I understand your fear," he signs. "Dark Shadow and I are here, though, and we will abandon the mission in an instant if you need us." Izuku feels his eyes sting with tears because, yeah, this is a training exercise, but it's still important. Tokoyami can't just abandon it. "We will do this together, my friend." Tokoyami signs. Dark Shadow curls closer around Izuku until he can feel the almost cool feathery brush of his aura. "Let's do it." Izuku signs. His hands are shaking so badly it's almost illegible, but he's determined. They can do it. They're going to.